I mean, I didn't see mine anywhere.
No, I think that, yeah, I think that is the website.
The what one?
I think the one you clicked on.
Okay, the first one's got that. Here we go.
Yeah, it's what they, connection.
Was the link on, Tyler, was the link on the website? That's how you got it? Okay.
I don't feel like.
I went to the calendar. We went to the calendar and we pulled them off that.
10 days.
Good.
Hey, are you coming? No rush. It's upstairs in the, the whatever room.
I was
Sucker.
thinking that, I
Okay.
have an old email that I sent to my mom, because her friend's spelling line also, it has a breakdown of all the random stuff they did for Andrew.
Beatty, hi. How are you? No, you're good. It's Bina. I think we're gonna need that chair for a committee. There's
Yeah, so I might.
maybe one by Jamie.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're-
Try to find more chairs.
If you can, that'd be great. Hi, thank you. You just said I'm
Right, yeah.
sorry. Also, thanks for the email. I've been on vacation, so I had to start next year.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
And we got. Can you share? No.
Hi, Forrest. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you. I made co-host because I'm gonna give the computer to view shed, and so then if other folks come into the waiting room, can you accept them?
Absolutely. I just used an old link, so hopefully others will do that.
The same one that's on the website too for this meeting, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just trying to move things. I was gonna wait for Rick to do that. We can just get started. I am gonna give this to you guys. Oh. Sugar and spice. Gentle. you want these things. Oh. Hi, everyone. How's it going?
Good.
As you know, Sophie is not here today, due to changes in select board makeup. So I will call to order with my co-chair Susan Todd.
Afternoon, thank you for coming, and we will start, we'll have to start right away and, do the approval of the minutes. Any comments?
I did make the edit that the last date or the date for this meeting is actually today, so thank you.
There's Rick.
And Rick, there's a seat between Tyler and. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
No comments.
All right, so can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I never saw it.
I just forwarded them to you again.
When?
Well, you got the initial email weeks ago, and then I forwarded them to you this morning when I saw you.
assume everything's fine, so, okay.
But if you have it, I can easily make them, so.
I know it could be exceptional.
Second? Show of hands. Meetings are approved.
Abstain.
All right, minutes are approved with one abstention. All right, we have the town manager update, Audra?
So I don't really have any updates for the committee because I don't think there's really much going on that you all aren't aware of. I guess though, if there's anything that any of you are curious about that you don't think I've sort of addressed, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Audra, could you give us an update on the applications, the grant applications that was discussed at the last select board meeting before the election, and what the process is and schedule is?
Well, no real schedule because we're still kind of waiting on those announcements, so we're really just doing background work to be prepared for when they do make announcements.
And is this committee going to be advised or have any kind of a preview of those applications, or just going in without our input or whatever?
I guess, would the committee like to make any recommendations or look at the applications?
Anybody else?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see
It would be.
what's going on. I
Right.
think we've been a little bit out of the loop in that way.
Yeah.
No grant applications have been submitted, so there's nothing
Yeah.
to be out of the loop of yet.
Yes.
So just the whole process, I felt like a little lost, but you filled me in. I'm good now, but I just wanted to make sure that we all are, we know the timeline of things and when the announcement comes out, you let us know. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
how important it is for us to like be in the nitty gritty details, but it would be nice to just.
Yeah, sure. So if we, if there's like a funding announcement, I can, email that around to everybody. And, as we sort of go through the process of putting, like a grant application together, I can certainly keep everybody updated, especially if there's pieces of it that, are directly sort of relevant to what you're working on now.
Right.
That'd be great.
I think just for, sense of openness and everything, I think people in the community, I don't say they know it, but I think there's an expectation that we would be part of that process in some way or another. So, good.
Any other updates on DOT, bridge work? Or how often are
Um,
you meeting with them or hearing from them on progress of that?
Well, I can give you a similar update to one that I gave the select board at their last meeting. So I think that the best, information that we have so far is that construction probably wouldn't begin until winter of 2027. And that's planned to coincide with giving them 2 years to do right of way work and some the other like planning that they need to do in the background before the project begins. They're not planning on doing any construction outside of a time frame from January to April, or October to April. And they're also going to detour northbound traffic around the project area, but keep the southbound lane open. Or keep a lane open for southbound traffic.
And you had also mentioned in the meeting that there's no intent on eminent domain affecting any of the
Yep, so
properties.
MDOT has no need to take any property by eminent domain for this project. But I guess, you know, notable is that they're giving a lot longer for right-of-way work and negotiation with landowners than they usually do, because there are a lot of complicated private property issues in that there are several buildings that attach to the bridge, and they need to detach from the like, structural attachments. And for the project to happen, they need to detach, and they're gonna have to do that by hiring their own structural engineers to make assessments and recommendations on the work that they need to do, and then paying their own contractors to do that work.
And one other question, give us an update on the sluice gate at Montgomery Dam.
Yep, so that was replaced, I believe 2 weeks ago now. And, it's functioning properly. It took 5 business days to replace, so that was a really quick turnaround for that project. And, you know, the next stage of all that is, that I think there's going to be some work done on the, you know, that island area.
Thank you.
One other thing I think would be helpful to address is Courtney's email that you sent out about the, you know, co-chair, select board liaison, how that's all gonna shake out. Another idea that I think was in here was if we wanna keep doing the rotating chair, if we wanna have a needed chair, you know, there's some committees that don't have a select board chair, like, is that still, and we don't have to decide now, but I just wanted to at least put it on the table as, you know, address your email here and now.
Yeah, and to that, you know, the select board will be making there's an organizational meeting that'll happen in the next select board meeting that always happens following an election. And, either at that one or a subsequent select board meeting, which I suspect highly, prior to the next, river committee meeting, that, you know, we'll have decided what we're doing for liaisons. It is my, you know, it's my personal opinion is, and it might not be the opinion of the other select board members, is that, the chair of this committee should not be a select board member, is what I'll be encouraging my, fellow select board members to do as well. So it is something that, you know, to think about, you know, for you, you know, people here with the committee that, okay, you know, we're not going to have a select board chair at the committee. Does that diminish the committee? No, not at all. It's certainly the intent to be a, you know, community-led group. So by having a select board member doing it, it just felt awkward, and it would be best, I'm going to recommend it'd be best that it be left to this committee to decide your own, how you chair. And, not to sound crass, but I would say, we really don't care, as long as it works. And as long as it's driven by the community and not being driven by a select board, not a top-down approach, but,
And one
we
piece with
wanna
that is,
work with, you know, your job is to come up with those recommendations. You've got an effective, you know, mission statement, what you're supposed to do. And, you know, we will have, most likely, you know, 2 select board members who will be liaisons, but they won't be voting members, and they won't have a particular agenda. I mean, they can not certainly answer questions, but they won't be the head. But Audra was saying, oh, so, you know, yeah, they won't have a rudder. No, we won't want to be the rudder. We're like a keel, you know, just significant drag.
And I guess
Yeah,
to that
and
end,
have a
we
voting-
looked through the
yeah.
bylaws just to refresh us as to sort of, you know, what that spelled out. You know, luckily, all of you were the ones who wrote your own bylaws and approved them, and you did put in there that it would be a select board liaison that was chair, but you have the ability to change your own bylaws. So that's something that you can all do if you wanna be the people who determine who the chair is from your own membership.
So in the situation of it not being a select board chair, 1 or 2 of you would be here at every meeting to be the liaison between what's happening here and there.
Yeah, you know, just in case there are, and we should be around for questions, and also maybe get a sense, you know, of what's going on. And, to be a, you know, a fly on the wall really is our intent. And if there is additional need for clarity on a certain thing, sure. But beyond that, we're not voting members. I mean, the group was to go ahead and do research, get community involvement, and, make a recommendation to the select board. It's really not appropriate for the select board to be driving a particular agenda on that. And it should be, just like what we learned with the Farmington presentation that was done up at the middle school. What made them successful were a couple of things. Primarily that it was community driven. And two, recognition that some things do cost money. In their case, the fish ladder versus regular dam, fish ladder was expensive too. But the important thing is, it was the community, to me, learning about, okay, having that community broad-based support is what's important. And I think it's best done from a bottom up as compared to top down. So again, that's just gonna be my recommendation of when we talk about this with the select board next week. If I can get it to come up then, if not, it'll be in the subsequent one, because we have to go through that organizational thing anyhow. But that's my intent.
Perfect, thank you. That's helpful to know.
Chris, do you have any concern if we modify the bylaws to have a FB environmental individual as a co-chair along with someone else? We've had this nice rotating co-chair, which is kind of fun, but I think having one person, and not to put you on the spot, but.
I think it should be you and me, man.
Okay.
Well, whatever the committee thinks will be the best, again, community supported, community involved
Yeah.
decision, is the best, to me, the best way to go. And what do you?
Another question I had was related to your email and what I've heard from a couple other people in the last 24 hours, I guess, is can the MERCAC provide a recommendation of what representatives they think should be on this, like.
I don't think there's any reason to stop that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not gonna say no.
Yeah.
You can't,
Yeah.
sure. It still is up to the select board to make the decision, but, I don't wanna stop you.
Dina, I didn't hear your question.
I was just, so I've heard that, I think it'd be great to have Allison and Ken should be at these meetings because they have different views and they also have a
Oh, I
lot of
see.
information, and I'm just gonna say the email as we read it, but, and so if the committee, and we can, send emails around this, so we don't spend too much time on this today, but if the committee has a recommendation of Tyler should be the chair, and we have these two people from the select board as the, people that sat at the table but don't vote and aren't necessarily a chair, but at least can provide input on the project and answer questions instead of just be limited to the 2 minutes at the end of the meeting.
I got it, okay.
I don't know that we need to formally identify an FB person as the chair, because functionally they already are.
Right.
They're already doing so much support and all that, so.
So we may just need to pull back from the co-chair with the select board member and have a rotating chair.
Right, or either a rotating or a permanent one. I mean, I think the rotating thing was, as you said, I think, you said fun, I was like. I think it's worth sort of exploring, at least in our own minds, what benefit there might be to having continuity of that chairmanship or chairship. And plus that, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Let's work it offline and then we can come back and make some motions next meeting.
Mike's gonna add something.
Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, the question also, even if the committee needs a chair, like you got a liaison, you got a facilitator. And I don't know if that makes anything, easier for the committee to think about. You don't have to identify a single person, who, all of those dynamics or whatever. But I was thinking back to other examples of community-led steering committees, and often they, there may be some, sort of natural, leadership roles that develop, but can't actually think of many that have an actual nominated chair. So that might be a structure that could also be.
Yeah.
For thinking about.
Before we step on to ask the question, Audra, is there any issue with 3 select board members being in this meeting at the same time?
I mean, it's a publicly advertised meeting. I've been told different things by board members in terms of their sensitivity to that, so,
Just raising that.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it can make a difference in whether or not you know, we are being involved in a significant decision. I've heard it defined that way as well,
Okay,
and we're not.
okay, good.
Also, is Ken sworn in yet?
Hmm?
Is it
Yeah, when is
effective
that?
immediately? That was
Yeah.
another, okay.
It has to be within 24 hours, actually.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
yeah, 24 hours.
Good to know.
Okay. This is great. Fine, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm curious about that too. When are we having an organizational meeting?
Next Tuesday.
Oh, wait. And is that what we're in a second?
I told them they should come and get sworn in by Katrina.
Oh, that already happened.
I think they did, I'm not sure, I haven't asked them.
Yep.
Ken was sworn
Ken
in.
Sanger.
Before.
All right, thank you. I was just doing a quick outreach and events updates, so SCA Fair, I think went well, there's a cute picture of Courtney and me. It was nice to have Ray there, Elfie, Dad, did you? Oh, that's okay. So yeah, thanks, I think that was productive, I had good conversations, so hopefully we all did too. I was curious if anyone wanted to table at any upcoming farmers markets, or if you guys have any other visions of how you wanna do more outreach.
I think what's on the agenda here, as far as the public process and everything, is what we should really be keying in on for the charrettes and everything.
Yeah.
That to me is going to draw the most interest
Yeah.
and have the most value and the best expenditure of our time going
Yeah.
forward.
Great,
What is
Ah.
going to be, what did you think?
like a big community event,
Oh, sure.
yeah.
I'm not opposed to doing farmers markets if it feels
Hmm.
helpful. I thought that last time we talked about it, it seemed like we were maybe tabling it because of the.
Until later in the summer.
Right, okay, yeah. So we can revisit it. I'm not against it.
Yeah, I found them to be, you know, useful, even if we were talking, half the people we're talking to were from away, like,
Yeah.
George, but, yeah, but it was, I thought it was good, and plus, it helped. I don't know if anyone else felt the same way, but I feel like talking with other people about the work we're doing helps my mind wrap my head around what it is that we're actually doing,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Good.
Try to pass it.
Oh,
And I do need to send out, meeting minutes, or at least this meeting summary. I met with Tom Rockwell and Meg Quijano, so owners of Camden Deli and Smiling Cow last week. It was a productive meeting. We had Jeremy Martin there and, the town attorney and Tom Hedstrom and Tyler Smith. Sorry, I had to really visualize who's there, but, would you agree that it was a productive meeting?
Yeah, I think it was good and constructive. It's good to hear from some of the owners that are directly butters to that, reflection feature and what they like about that feature, I think was really important.
Mhm.
I think, for me, a big insight that Tom brought up was, that I hadn't thought about before, was the sound of the waterfall is a big part of, what he looks for in it. So, yeah, I think it's good. I think we can probably capture some bullet points from that, and I think there's, things to be passed on to the landscape architects as they're working with designs.
And we're gonna
Pass that
continue.
along to us as
Yes.
well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it feels like it's still, some of these, meetings that are happening more privately, I feel a little out of touch on
Totally.
what the.
It happened on Wednesday, and then I
information is
admittedly
from it.
went out of town Thursday
Okay,
and
yeah,
got back
I
late
just,
last
it's
night,
hard for me
so.
to know, like, what the big.
This
takeaways
is
were
just
without-
informing you that these
Okay.
meetings are happening, and I'll
Okay.
send meeting information
Gotcha, okay.
after, and so Jeremy Martin, town planner, is going to reach out to some more landowners and abutters and schedule more of these meetings.
Okay.
So somebody from this
And I
committee will
think-
be meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna see if Tyler could continue at least with these, with the owner, the Main Street, building owners, if you guys would like someone else there as well, that's great. I'm just trying not to overburden or overtax anyone. And honestly, he wasn't like speaking on behalf of MerCap necessarily, you were more listening on behalf of MerCap, I would say.
But I do think it'd be helpful for the rest of the committee who are not involved in those
Yeah.
meetings, if we get a summary bullet point.
Right, and
summary
I just said, I will be sending that shortly, so,
Of
yeah.
that, so that we have it for our records and
Right.
also for our information going forward.
Absolutely understand, yeah,
Good.
and that information is forthcoming. Op-ed updates, they look great, thank you, Elfie, for your,
Yes.
I mean, we've only had one, right?
I know, but you have the other
next
one in the
next
hopper.
one's ready, right? Next one's ready to go, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
so are you
And I
gonna,
have a third one.
And do you send them out, you have like a schedule, you're sending them out, you feel good about?
I don't know the schedule part. We sent out the first one and I need to like go home tonight and send the second one. So I guess it's gonna be every week like
Great.
that. Yeah, I'm still not clear on what the deadlines are for each newspaper, so I'm just sending them out all together. Yeah,
But we have
Courtney,
some
isn't
good
it like
feedback.
Friday morning or Thursday?
Yeah,
from
Thursday afternoon.
what I said,
Yeah.
Wednesday.
one person.
Right, but oh yeah, Allison knows that.
Wednesday at noon, it's Wednesday at noon for the Camden Herald, and we've been trying to stick to that lately. I don't, it's been a little
That
necessary, but.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you for doing those and leading that charge.
Excuse me, just before we move on from events, just for the sake of kind of completing the record, we did have a table at the duck thing,
Duck Derby.
duck derby,
Yeah.
and limited exposure to the public, but the few conversations we did have were good, yeah. It was one guy who had a lot of information and follow-up questions that he was there with us for a good half hour, so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyway, yeah.
All right, are we ready to pass the mic?
Do we have plans yet for the other charrettes?
That'll be part of the conversation.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Ready?
I'm ready. Look at us, we're right on time.
Good. Thanks for having us back. It's good to see you all again. We were here on the 8th of May. We've got a lot to go through tonight, so we've got a pretty full agenda, which I'll dive into in a minute. But I'm Eamon Hutton. I'm a design principal, landscape architect for Viewshed. I'm joined by Izzy and Jamie from our team here. And just sort of reminder of our role in the project. So our role is to serve you and to help you all clarify and distill a set of options for the dam and for this project area. And then next, to put those in front of your community for a design charrette and get their feedback. Finally, to make recommendations to the select board. So our role is to help you visualize what you'd like to see for those sets of options. So that's really the agenda tonight, is to clarify where we can, what you'd like to see. So that we can go back and do some very detailed drawings, because I know how important that is for you all to see what this will look like to help you make your decision. So we'll go through a lot tonight, but just want you to understand that what we're seeing, or what I'll share, is really an aggregate of a lot of the work that you all have done and seen over the past couple of years, and in some cases longer, so that you get a survey of it all. And then we're going to try to get to a set of decisions where we can, so that we know as the design team what to draw in more detail next. So that's where we're heading in the big picture. Those are our objectives. We're also going to talk about some of the lessons we learned from the last meeting and the feedback that we got. We talked a lot last time about what sort of data you all need in order to make your decisions. So we talked about costs, we talked about talked about getting specific about habitat and what that means, talked about resilience. And then the bulk of our work tonight will be number 4 here, which is looking at these 3 project types. And I'll go into that in more detail. And then we'll cast our eyes ahead and look and talk about process at the end. So again, our objective tonight is to work on 3 project types, of which you've seen many examples over the years, to clarify what you'd like us to articulate for each of them. Those 3, and this is an update from last time, include status quo reconstruction. So that's reconstructing what you have today. You could call it the sort of preservation option, but we really understand that the condition of the dam means really rebuilding the dam, if you want that to stay as is. In the middle, we have B, which is partial reconstruction. That encompasses a lot, so we'll spend a lot of time talking about what that might mean. Different shapes to the dam, different ways of creating fish passage, different impacts to the context. And then C, full dam removal as the 3rd project type. So again, we'll look at a lot of examples, but it's really a discussion for us to hear from you all about what you'd like to see for each of those. That's our objective tonight. zooming out to talk about process, and you're asking about charrettes. So you all, here we are in June in your MERCAC meeting. You'll have monthly meetings marching forward. I can zoom in. I can see it's people trying to focus.
I think it's such a big file, it struggles with this, I was trying to do it earlier.
Well, let me, Van and White animate it for you. So here we have a calendar stretching forward, June, July, August, September, October, November. And what we're tracking in this first line is your committee's agenda or your committee's timeline. So we're meeting here, you'll meet again in July, again in August. There's the recommendation to the select board at the cusp of August and September. We'll meet again in September, October, November. This is my team of landscape architects. So we're here tonight to talk about what you'd like us to render and draw in more detail. Then we'll spend the next month or so getting into those drawings and developing renderings. I'll give you more examples tonight of what I mean when I say rendering, so don't worry, but very illustrative drawings. Then we'll meet again in July, get your feedback on those drawings, moving our way toward the public charrette. So we want your feedback one more time before we go to the public, because it's really your options that you're putting forward to your community. So that'll happen here, and then following that, we can reconvene and we can all discuss what we learned in the charrette. And we're here to support you all the way up to the select board recommendation if you have follow-up questions or need more detail. And then this final bar is the process that the broader community, the public will experience. Their next touch point with us will be the public meeting in early August. And then ultimately, the chance to vote on the outcome they'd like to see in November. Yeah.
If we have, you basically have your final renderings, like at the beginning of August, it looks like there. And then we go into a charrette where we get feedback on those. And then potentially change the drawings based on the charrettes. So is that all happening in that second half of August before we make a recommendation?
We have to talk about that
Okay,
tonight.
because that feels like,
And if that's the process you really want. But you've got the next few steps. We'll
okay,
draw something in detail. We'll come back with a month before the meeting to say, what did we get right? What did we not get right? What do you want us to show the public? And we'll go to the public. One of the things we want to talk about tonight is, what are the outcomes you want from that public conversation? Are you saying like, vote on these, tell us what you like the best, or we're just here to inform you about these options and we, the committee, will be making decisions. So we want to get a better sense of what you want out of that. And that'll guide what we're doing here
okay.
more, because it's really about how much time we need to sort of process after that. But yeah, we'll have to stay focused and make decisions, I think is really important.
When you say process, would we be involved with the process?
all you,
Or would
yeah.
you do the processing and then we'd come in and talk about it?
No, we would come together and sort of give you what we'll do is develop a summary. So it's hard to say without having yet talked about what that public charrette will be, but imagine we're in a public charrette where we're saying, very basic, put a sticker on the one you like the most. When we come back to you, we'll say, this one got 59% of the stickers, this one got 31, this got 10. So we'll give you that raw data, but then it'll be a process of working with you to say, well, what do we do with this now? Are we trying to update this design to make it reflect the feedback? Are we trying to merge it with this other one to make just one out of two? So we need your guidance.
At what point are we gonna talk about the desired outcomes, as you said, of the charrette and the process we will use? Because I've had in my head that this is, I thought it was gonna be more than one, a meeting in which not only do we count what they like, in other words, identify, I like that one and that one and that one, so you
Yeah.
have numbers, but comments from people,
Yeah,
questions they have,
yeah.
ideas for how to tweak it, that
Yeah.
kind of feedback. I mean, is it possible? Does that timeline allow us to do that?
So tonight's agenda ends with us getting into this in a lot of detail, so I guess we
Won't be
certainly.
tonight. No, it won't be tonight that we'll figure out what to do in the.
Right, perhaps not, and this is something we do a lot, so we've kind of seen so many variations, we're here to support you in how you want, but there's sort of big questions here about, is that what this whole committee wants to get out of that meeting? I think you all need to help us understand, and if so, we can give you the tools you need to do that. It's a tight timeline if you wanna have multiple public meetings, which I'm not sure if that's what you were saying, but.
Well, it's sort of what was in several of our heads, I think.
And I think one thing that we also need to remember is we're collecting data this whole time, like we've received a ton of comments so far. We're meeting with people all the time and should continue to meet with people, so whether it's in the format that you're envisioning.
But we're not hearing that feedback, Dina, that's what
Okay.
I'm saying. We, for most of us on this committee, and I speak for myself directly, I don't know. We've heard that these meetings are going on
But
and there's.
I feel like you know generally the comments from the community, right? And so I'll continue to share what those are. And I'll, as we go through these other meetings, I'll continue to share that, but I do wanna emphasize that we've been hearing from the community for a while.
Right, but since the very beginning,
Yeah.
one of the things that most people have been asking for is, well, what would it look like?
Right.
And so month after month after month, what will it look like? Finally, they're gonna see,
Right.
and they're not gonna have any time to respond.
And what if it's not what they're looking for?
Mm.
I think that's my
Yeah.
concern as well, is, oh my gosh, they're way off base.
That none of this will work. So, and that's, the project hasn't been designed to allow for that kind of
Yeah.
outcome.
Well, we're here to support, and, we're certainly able to design a public engagement that gives people the platform to give us that feedback. And we'll see what we hear back. I know Bina's process has had surveys and engagement to date, so there's some track record of what the community would like from that. Then in the public meeting, we can ask all of these questions. I think it's also a question for you all. What is the role of community engagement in this process, and how is that going to inform your recommendations? So getting really clear on that tonight will help us design the right process, because it could be, I'm not saying this is true, but for example, hypothetically, you believe that you are going to make 3 or 2 recommendations to the select board, and the layout of trees in those 3 is sort of irrelevant to the choice being put in front of voters. Then we're not gonna ask people in the public meeting what they think about the trees, right? So we can design it to help you make the important choices you need to make, which might mean limiting what we're asking people, not saying like, hey, just sort of tell us everything you believe about this, but saying to them, there'll be more process down the road to design these details. So tonight, let's focus on this. But yeah, let's get into it tonight.
And also, there's like many summaries of public input received to date that can be compiled and sent out to everybody. And, a lot of it will get at specific, visual features that they have questions about or concerns about or opinions. So, that's something that we could send to the entire committee if all of you think that would be helpful. And just giving you a little bit of background before you get into all of this on things that we're generally hearing or collected as feedback throughout the life of this project, which is 6 years old now. So there's significant amounts of community input.
Courtney, Brave, Mike.
I think I mentioned this last time, I think it'd be really helpful to explain at the very onset of our community meeting, just what's been talked about, done, the stakeholder involvement, the meetings, just give the background on that, because I think people that are like just getting involved, they have no idea how much work's been done. And I think this meeting is about providing information as much as it's getting input, and maybe even more about these, assuaging the fears that are out there about like total removal, is the best option, and people think that that's being tossed around, and that's really not,
Right. Yeah, so whenever we lead a public engagement process, which we're excited to do here, those conversations, those meetings begin with what's been said already, what we've heard already, so that folks know they're dropping into a conversation that's ongoing, and that there may be lessons learned from those previous conversations that are informing why they're seeing what they're seeing that night. And sometimes you'll have folks that are just showing up for the first time, and they need that, even while others might be familiar with the whole history.
Right.
For the public engagement process that you referred to and everything, are you thinking, or are we thinking about a 1 day, 3 day, a week-long process? I mean, everybody can't get to see those on the same day, let's assume that. So what, and you've done this before, what is the typical process that you use for this
Yeah,
type of a decision?
well, and then there's the reality of my contract with the team and what
Right.
we're really
Yes,
doing,
right.
so we can bring the two together.
Understand that.
So I think for something like this, we want access for as many people as possible. We don't wanna make it something that only certain folks can come to. So removing barriers is important. Again, in a town this size, so we're working a lot in Rockport to design a very important site for them, and
Yeah.
it's been a really robust engagement process. So there, it's talking about the work that's already been done.
Mhm.
So there has been process, we're not starting a conversation from scratch.
Yeah.
Having open public meetings that are accessible and have accessible information, so they're not highly technical. They include visuals, you know, so anybody can walk in and understand what they're seeing.
Yeah.
That there's time to talk to the design team and have your voice heard, but also get questions answered. Also that in a meeting like that, and I'm just speaking about this one meeting, that there's some way to provide measurable feedback. So I talked about stickers, that's kind of the bare minimum, but some way that at the end, we're not just sort of swirling around a lot of opinions and people who grab my elbow to tell me what they really think, but that there's some way that people are essentially voting in that. Now, that doesn't mean we go back, count those votes, and the 100 people that showed up that night decide the future of your waterfront. It's not exactly that. It has to be balanced, but trying to come away with something measurable is really important. So to make it more accessible, sometimes we record the meeting, post it online, and provide opportunities to comment there, so people can do it asynchronously if they had to work. Sometimes we'll do it where we're presenting a recording, but also have a Zoom link so people can watch in real time from where they are. That's how we can make a single event as accessible as possible. And then there's lots of sort of opportunities to go above and beyond that.
And pre-committee, some of the designs that were made before, like the one in the feasibility report and others, they were shown on YouTube, before this committee. So Alice and Audra were involved in that and got a lot of input from the community there. So we have that synthesized and can, make sure that we're building on that. I think you've all talked to a lot of, I think we're just continuing to build. Like, I don't want it to seem like this is step one. This is like step 16 or whatever. But go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead.
At what point do the library's concerns get worked in? Because one edge of these designs is going to involve what is currently something that the library.
I think that's a great question. So I would love to continue to have, let's go take these designs to the library and have them give us feedback. And I think figuring out, who are those, how do we engage with people in the most effective way possible? And I've been chatting with Jeremy and Susan and Jennifer and making sure that they're all in the loop and.
Yeah, it wasn't on the chart, that's why.
Okay, well, it's all.
Yeah, probably on a similar timeline when coming back with the rendered, hits, in a month or so. And I guess I just wanted to comment, I've heard it said and had it said many times, like, we just need to know what it looks like, this mythical it. And I can tell you, like, we went around the table, every single committee member and every single member of the public has a different concept of what it is. So that makes it really hard to come back with like I need to know exactly what it looks like when there's probably 35 or 40 concepts in this room. And so that's the work we're doing tonight. We're gonna, and Dina made reference to various design concepts that have been put in front of various aspects of the public over the last 5 years, including some things that followed from the feasibility study, things that were developed by Stephen Moore, and some other things that Tyler has brought along, and we're using those. None of those are it. None of those are it in the various categories that are being presented, but we're using those graphical representations to have a conversation about what about these options do we really like? What do we not like? What are other considerations for each of these projects so that we can go and draw it in each of those three categories? So I'm, as you can tell, somewhat sensitive to being told to just go draw exactly what it is and show it to us. But that is the work that we're doing tonight, just to kind of preface.
Alright, let's, okay,
I just have one question about the date for the charrette. Has that already been determined?
I'll
or
send out an email,
can
because I
we-
have no idea when.
Can we move it back? I mean, early August seems pretty late if we have to
Move it
do,
sooner,
yeah, sooner. Backwards.
okay.
The public meeting
That's-
you're saying to happen
I think
sooner
it should
than-
have it sooner, yeah, like in July, end of July.
I think you all need more time to decide or to refine what we show the public. The it that Mike's referring to. Cause
What's more important, having that time or having the time after we get the information from the public to come up with the recommendations to the select board? I mean, don't we have
yeah,
to come up with the recommendations by the end of August, or is that September? Or, oh, okay, my September stuff.
Yeah,
it's an interesting notion.
It says,
I think we would
September
change
1st.
strategies, right? We would change strategies if we were to, I don't know if it's even possible, but if we were to try to go quickly, I would say, don't try to render everything, but present. And I don't think this group wants this, so that's why I'm sort of pushing back and maybe prefer this approach, but if we have to go quick, there's the production time, but there's also if we're giving the community the sense that, you know, we're looking for all of your design ideas and your preferences, I think we would want to show them lots of examples, gather that feedback, and then distill it into a set of 2 or 3 or whatever you all decide options to then make part of your recommendation. So I think what we've elected to do here, which gets to this next slide, is to actually get to much more clarity with you all, and then put those more clarified, built on past work, informed by this team, really clear ideas out front, and then get the feedback on those and refine them. So I think, you know, there's many possibilities for how to sort of land that meeting. But I think it changes your tactic in the meetings. But I hear the point, and others are mentioning it. We have to make sure we have enough time after the public meeting to incorporate what we've heard and get to a set of designs that we like. So I think that actually means we start tonight and we have to get to clarity as efficiently as we can. So you're already seeing some of that come into play. So the first one was that you all want to put in front of the public and have put in front of you clear choices. So 3 options, not 6. You want to see status quo, partial removal, and full dam removal. And to get us to clarity, that those 3 will be vetted by you all. So again, what I was just saying, that you'll have a chance to review those before they go to the public. That you all want data. So when we're talking about, oh, this is expensive and this is less expensive, by how much? You know, you want to know real costs, but some other factors can come into data. Appearance really matters. So what it looks like is an important deciding factor. So we've got to get to a place where we can draw with some clarity, which again, we're not there now. So I need your help on that. And objectivity. So we're a team of scientists, engineers, landscape architects. We have a lot of professional experience and skill around this work. But we don't want to put our thumb on the scale or influence what decision is made here. That's really not our intent. I think I gave that sense to some of you last time and I struck a nerve, and I'm really sorry about that. I think I did in a couple ways. The first one was innocuous and just, I was sort of showing a filled out bingo card, like, this is what I would put up there. And I think for some of you, it's like, well, we don't need what you personally want. So that, and I just had, you know, we are dropping into this process now. So we're new to the party and there's a learning curve. And I made the statement that part of this committee's goal was fish connectivity. That's not true. So mea culpa. We really aren't trying to make this decision for you. So We're here to support, and I think we can move in that direction and just appreciate the forgiveness on that front. So, talking about data, so how are we gonna help you make your decisions? We want to talk about how each project type performs in terms of cost, in terms of habitat connectivity, and in terms of resilience. So let's say a little more about that. So what is cost? Capital cost. So if you decide to reconstruct the dam, how much is that going to cost to build, right? Capital cost is that upfront ticket. We accept with that there's then a long-term replacement cost. So if you build a $5 thing, someday it'll break and you'll build another $5 one. We won't get into inflation, but there's a sort of casting out of cost into the future. Then there's annual costs, so maintenance and operations, keeping the thing humming, cleaning it off every year, fixing a few broken things. There's also episodic or periodic repairs that might be more significant. A bigger piece breaks. It's not full replacement, but something chunky broke down. So those are our annual maintenance costs. For tonight's conversation, you'll see we talk about a life cycle of about 50 years when we're talking about that. And then thirdly, there's funding partners. So we talked a bit about grants. In some scenarios, you'll be eligible to get grant funding to pay for some of the capital costs. That varies depending on the type of project and the type of grant you're going after. So there's 3 factors that we'll present back to you about cost.
One quick question,
Yeah.
like the maintenance costs and everything like that, will you factor in also what the historic costs have been, like over the last 10 years, whatever? What the
I
town
think
has
that
spent
will
on?
inform, that'll
Yeah.
definitely inform the process.
We'll do our best, and certainly in the reconstruction of the dam as is, in that scenario,
Yeah.
that's where that would be really relevant.
Great, thank you.
So habitat connectivity is another metric we can give you. So some of the scenarios introduce Denil fish ladders and lots of things we talked about last time. And they have varying ways of getting fish upstream. We've shown 5 examples here, from the existing dam to Denil to Pool and Weir, nature like step pool, nature like channel. And the message is they have different lengths and different slopes to them. And the more gentle, the better they are at getting the fish up the hill, because as you can imagine, it's hard to swim up a waterfall. It's easier to swim up a low embanked stream. So when we come back to you with a set of designs that are developed in more detail, we can tell you the type of fish connectivity, if there is one, or habitat connectivity in that scheme, and we'll give you a sense of how well it might work. Then resilience. So we're talking about 2 things with resilience. We're talking about the river and the ocean and sort of separate issues. So different scenarios have different effects on the way the river levels run. So if we were to partially remove the dam, lowering it by 4 feet, the upstream water levels would go down. So spring high water would be lower than it is today, but normal water flow would be lower than it is today. And that has some resiliency implications. Then, and the same with full dam removal or keeping or rebuilding the dam that you have, that affects the kind of upstream condition. Then there's sea level and resilience from the sea. So that's storms, but also just the level of the water. So we think about that in terms of the mean tide, but also highest annual tide, and then different storm surges. That's been impacting the seawall and the whole harbor, as you all know, I'm sure. So we'll provide factors for both of those. When we give you back designs, we'll say, you know, this one really moves the needle. It helps address sea level rise, but it doesn't do anything for the river, for example. We'll talk more in the designs about the seawall, because depending on where we are or in which project type we do or don't need to make a change to that wall, which is to say certain dam futures do impact or do require change to the wall and others don't. And there's a lot we can say about what might come to replace that wall if you do want to proceed with rebuilding it. There's different technologies, there's different ways to rebuild. But that'll be more clear as we get into the different project examples. So the next time we meet, what we'd like to have is a refined sort of scorecard for each of the 3 designs, where you see your 3 costs, capital, O&M, and funding. You see the level of connectivity, and you see the level of resilience for the river and the ocean. So that's just foreshadowing how we'll help you make these decisions next time. So again, we're now going to dig into 3 project types: status quo reconstruction, partial dam reconstruction, and full dam removal. In each one, we're going to, this is the part I was saying about we need your feedback. So the things we need to discuss when we get to the end of each one of these is, so what should we do? What should my team and I go back and draw for the dam? What should we draw for the fish passage? How should we think about the cascade or the waterfall? And how should we think about Harbor Park? We also want to talk about public space and talk about trees and benches and paths, but the decision going to the voters is about the dam and the future there. A lot of those details around the public space are really helpful for us to draw something, but they can be refined in the future. They're not married to one scheme or another.
Do you feel like we need to lump together Harbor Park and Montgomery Dam, or do you think they could be treated as 2 separate items?
Are you reading my notes?
No.
That is exactly where we're going. It depends on which one of these scenarios you're talking about. So status quo is the first one. We know and love this view. When we talk about a status quo dam replacement, we're talking about the existing or the repair or reconstruction of the existing dam here, which would continue then the cascade to the south and the cascade to the east facing the harbor. And to your point, it doesn't force a change to Harbor Park. Right? Just like it is today, the water would flow over the dam, down over the rocks. Harbor Park and the wall there do not need to change in that future. Now, that wall is not doing very well and storms are getting more intense, so it kind of does need to change, but they're not interlocked. So the town would then proceed with this process around dam reconstruction and move into the future however you all decide as a town about the sea level or the seawall. 2 separate projects. Just again, underscoring the seawall would stay as is. Access to the water would be down through the historic boat launch or boat ramp. I don't know what you all call it.
Grounding ramp.
Thank you. And you'll see when we get into some of the future concepts or some of the other examples, there are real changes happening there. So that's this piece. So this is the first occurrence, Tyler, of one of your examples.
Do you want me to pull it up?
No, I think we can probably talk to it here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong if you think we can't, but.
I think sometimes it's nice to go to fly around things, look from different views, but why don't you begin to talk and I can pull it up if that makes sense, right?
Great. So we're showing this here, which is a sketch Tyler's developed in 3D. It's the notion of the dam being rebuilt in place, but then that fish passage would be introduced. And what he's drawn here would be fish passage that's sort of chipped into the bedrock to create a pool and weir. Now, Mike is kind of lighting on fire looking at this because there's a lot of feasibility issues with this. This would be very hard to execute. So it's unlikely that it could play out quite like this. But this is the first, and then we'll see more of some examples of Tyler, what you've sketched up. But here, I think it actually raises a bigger question of what does status quo mean? If we're saying we're putting forward a status quo option, should we have any sort of change to or introduction of fish passage or habitat connectivity like this? Or is that sort of confusing the issue?
Yeah, status quo.
Yeah, I feel like that's alteration.
Yeah, just
Does anybody-
repairing the dam would be satisfied.
Does anybody disagree with that?
Say that again, please.
So when we set forth, next month when we come back.
Right.
And we set forth a status quo option, dam reconstruction, do we all agree that that does not have this or any other fish passage?
Status quo
Yeah.
today, meaning no fish passage.
And I would couch it to say anytime you're introducing fish passage, you're moving into concept 2.
Yeah.
Scenario 2.
Yeah.
And we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
I stacked the deck with an easy question first. They get a lot harder.
Within your status quo, would you? I'm making the assumption that dam technology has improved since this was originally done, and I'm wondering whether the sluiceway. I wonder whether the architecture of the dam or the sluiceway would be modified to perform differently, whether they're, right now it's a passive element that needs to get modified, and whether there's more of an active element that maintains certain levels, or just a question of whether that it would be included in status quo.
This is, I think, probably your.
Well, it's a good question. You know, it's something that we do struggle, because there is a sentiment that says, you know, leave what's there. Unfortunately, due to the condition of what's there, it's not really an option to be able to perform what you want it to. So it is a question of, well, do we put it back exactly? Or with, you know, enhancements. And I think the way to probably think about that is, you know, when it comes, you know, to open a good point of discussion, and I'd like to hear both from the rest of the committee and also members of the public, but you know, one variation, you know, and may come into play also with respect to the seawall as well, whether or not you put it, for various reasons, probably also needs to be completely reconstructed, to serve the same function as it does now in perpetuity. So, is there like a baseline status quo that just puts exactly back what's there, and then some variation that adds some modernization elements that, whether it's some additional sophistication to gate structures or with the seawall, whether it integrates some resilience components. I think that is probably good to talk through.
Yeah.
Whatever assumptions are made in the you know, that scenario will be clearly transparent with what those assumptions were.
Just have a quick question for each one of these. It sounds like you're gonna be talking through maybe a couple different options within the status quo and within the fish passage one. And within-
Status quo is maybe the exception. There are a couple
Okay.
options for B and C, but status quo, we're getting to this point of, if it's status quo.
Well, I
this is
guess
one.
I was just thinking like the,
Right.
the pure status quo with, you know, no repair could be an option. And then we talk about what are the costs of that?
Mhm.
And then, because we need costs for each of these.
Mhm.
So will you be looking at like a few options within and looking at the costs per options within, or how are you gonna be looking at costs is the real question.
Yeah.
I think just looking at costs with a description of what those, you know, so I think that's easier done than, you know, rendering 3 options in each of these project types, because that's just gonna put us back in the same sort of morass of, you know, like having all these varying things to sort through. But I think let's just keep track of this particular topic as we go through the evening, and we can make some decisions at the end. I guess preliminarily, I would say, you know, we are definitely gonna do a cost that is like, put it back exactly to the T. As
Right.
best we can estimate, and then
Right.
whether or not, you know, and that one in particular is interesting. You know, cause there's the status quo, but then status quo into the future. It's,
Yeah, and I'd be okay with more than 3 options. I mean, if we need 5, that's maybe what we need, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think we need to limit it.
Yeah.
I think the fewer we can
Yeah.
provide to,
Yeah.
I think we should
we-
refine it down. But I think we should have the discussion about, you know, I think if you're looking at rebuilding things, part of rebuilding it might be, you might actually have your reflection pool might all get reworked. You might have concrete structures in the back that define the back of the reflection pool that allow structures that sit over it, have something that attached to it, where you might have,
yeah, we're not gonna get into a whole lot of hypotheticals or conjectures
I think we
of
need to
that
go
nature, you know.
limited choices.
I mean, you know, I think
We'll
some,
spiral forever.
yeah.
I guess I'm just, to try to make the point I was making, is I think it's really important to talk about status quo right now. Like, what are the costs as is?
Yeah.
You know, and then what are the costs of status quo plus repairs? I think those are 2 different things, 2 different topics.
Is there an option where it stays as is and the town doesn't put any money into repairing it and it just crumble under it at some point? I mean, is that beyond
Well-
people?
I think that's a decision that probably the town needs to make more than this committee.
Well, right,
And
I'm
that's
just
where-
saying, is like, if you're just saying status quo where nothing is done, it seems like eventually.
Right,
Isn't that where we should be starting? What's going on right now? Like, how much does it cost to repair things and maintain them right now?
And so I
then
think the town is
the
doing it,
future,
yeah.
yeah,
but it's-
what,
yeah.
yeah, that's where.
Yeah.
I think as a townsperson, I'm gonna.
Well, let's remember, there is the Montgomery family gift that the town accepted for repairing the dam. You already have cost estimates for some of that work to be
Right,
done,
right.
including cleaning up the island in front, but for
Right.
repointing the dam, et cetera.
And that's all
And the-
data that will be included, yeah.
That should all be included. That's more like bringing it back to a status quo.
Just in the interest of time, I do wanna keep this.
Yeah.
Can I just put a marker on something, because
Yeah.
the suggestion that Tyler made about modernizing the dam.
Yeah.
Is there, do you know some way to pursue that? So that if you keep any modernization in balance with the overall appearance, it wouldn't be exactly your option one,
Mhm.
but it could still be a status quo, but one that works better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think what I'd offer up and then move on is that we zoom out and think about the longer picture here. So we have a decision point fast approaching for the community to decide what to do. And I think it's in the spirit of that vote that we get to some choices that are very distinct. And after that, once the community sort of said, you know, this way or that in this fork in the road, there's a lot more braiding going on where we can say, well, now that we've decided to replace our dam as is, as a community, do we think we should update this gear or this piece, you know? So I wouldn't burden yourselves right now with some of those, and we have to talk through, but I think it's sort of back to that idea of like, well, if we change Harbor Park, where should the trees go? That there are decisions that we have the luxury of making later, and there are decisions that need to be made now, and the clock is ticking to make some really big decisions now. So
I think the only pitfall there,
Yeah.
we'll have to just keep track of is, say, okay, we're just gonna put the dam back exactly the way it is with the same gates, we're gonna reconstruct it, but we're not gonna modernize it until we make a selection to that, collectively a decision is made to go with that, and then you make that decision. Now, but also while we're at it, we're gonna, add these additional elements that also would add a lot of costs, so I think you just need to be careful about what the decision is that you're making.
Right.
If, in particular, if there's
Yeah.
a decision that's made on, just purely on the basis of cost.
But the other thing to consider is that the seawall then is not addressed at Harbor Park.
it's addressed separately by the town has
Yes,
to.
exactly.
Yeah.
So there is that expense.
So that, and that's how
There
you,
is that expense.
and that's how you characterize
Yeah.
that option
Right.
is that.
It's a twofold expense, really.
Yeah.
There is that option that it doesn't, it would be borne out in those metrics that we talked about for resilience, Oceanside, for example.
And
So-
upper dams, we couldn't get those removed either, if we didn't do anything with the fish passage.
Yeah, there's a
On the
lot
cover.
of
So
cascade.
that-
Yeah, so.
So that's
either-
cost,
So,
so
yeah.
potentially in the future, we have to do.
Yeah, so in that case, with the metric of habitat connectivity, it would of course get a very negative grade for itself, but also, compounded by the impact that it also, writes off the rest of the
And
watershed.
would you bring up the potential flood damages if we don't remove the dams or?
I think the,
I mean, that's.
again, that comes into the metrics that, Eamon laid out, so there's the cost, which is actually kind of just like round robin talking through all three of those. Good, because everybody's feedback is falling right into those buckets, cost, habitat connectivity, and then the resilience pieces, of which there's an ocean side to it with the seawall and then a river side to it. And so in characterizing, those projects, will represent, how each of those, falls into those metrics. Makes sense?
So if I can, when we come back, we want to know what we're going to draw, because we're going to draw in a lot of detail so you can see what it looks like. What I'm hearing is that the dam impoundment is redrawn as is, right? So you have the same dam in the same place with the same water level. What I'm hearing is that we're not in the status quo showing, habitat connectivity of the kind of fish passage sort. That the cascade aesthetic is going to be what you have now, the water falls over in two places. And that we are not addressing Harbor Park in it, because that's not forced by this change, because there's no change in that. So that's what I'm hearing for these four discussion points. Public space here, I think is a bit easier than some of the following ones, because we're not getting into Harbor Park. And we're saying we don't change the dam, so it is what it is.
I think Cascade Aesthetics, I think the original dam had water flowing equally over the whole, the whole surface. It egresses the ledge into two locations, but it actually flows over the whole dam.
And it still does that today, or is that something that's sort of fallen apart?
With enough water.
So putting it back, status quo would be to bring back that even flow,
It's a little seasonally determined as well.
water level.
Right,
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
But ideally,
Noted.
it's 100 foot, when you take the L shape and like that, it's over 100 feet of water flow from Cascade.
And an identical elevation.
Yep, so dead level, it's a weir, spills over everyone's. Okay,
It's not readily apparent
that was
If you
the,
look at it today, it's not readily apparent that.
because it sort of wobbled and spills some
Right.
places first.
Right.
And there's a leak too.
Yeah, yeah, we have an understanding that it was a continuous spillway and that's what the association would be.
So that was the easy one.
So I was also acknowledge that time is going so fast, but I don't wanna stop any conversation. I know, everything's important, so I'm saying,
That's add an hour then, right?
I was going to ask, is there any way people can stay till 6:30?
Sure.
But I was gonna say also that, like, let's just let him do his whole presentation,
Right.
take notes on what we might wanna go back to.
Good call.
Yeah. Do you think we convinced them? Scenario B, so we refer to this as the partial reconstruction. So this is one of the options that I think you have all seen, the more design. Tony, I think you're gonna say a few words about it, is that right? So I can give the broad brush
There's
strokes.
this detail sketch and then there's the rendered sketch.
Yeah, so we have a couple ways of looking at it. But I forgot where we landed. Is Tony gonna talk through this or should I?
Tom,
So,
What do we
do
see?
you wanna go to the next slide? Or do you like this?
No,
one?
no,
Okay.
but just for sort of reminder, this has been kicking around till last September, and it's a little frustrating that you guys haven't seen it.
I mean, yeah,
But-
sorry, we haven't talked through.
You haven't talked about it, but, and Sally and I did this because of this sort of polarization that was going on, and then we funded this ourselves, asked Stephen to do it, and presented it. It was in the newspapers, so it's essentially been predicted to the public, but we specifically presented to the Save the Dam, the Restore Megunticook, and the library board. Those are the people we invited, as well as the press, to the presentation. With sort of partial turnout of all those. The important thing, I think, is sort of the instructions we gave to Stephen were create the most naturalized fish passage we can that would be acceptable for funding for NOAA. Number one. Number two, consider and sort of enhance the aesthetics at all flow levels. There's dramatic difference in the aesthetics here at different flow levels, and I think it's really important to remember that. And I think my recommendation would be that you show those aesthetics at low flows and high flows. Because it's how many days a year does the water flow over the dam? How many days a year does it just flow down through this narrow route? We asked that he try to maintain the pond above the dam. That preserve the flows to the south towards here that come now down towards the public landing, as well as the flows to the east. And not encroach on Harbor Park at all. So that was part of our instruction was don't touch Harbor Park. But then figure out how to tie in whatever you do to the work that's necessary. The seawall work that's necessary at Harbor Park so that it has a consistent look and feel and you don't do one project and then do the other and have them not talk to each other. And it also had to be acceptable to the appropriate regulators, primarily the DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. Both of them get a vote. And they talked to those. My hope, this is not, I don't like this plan, just to be clear, right? But it was a compromise and it sort of, I thought, sort of everybody's wishes. But it is, originally, I wanted to do what Tyler you showed in that drawing, and I said, can't you, that was my vision, it's, boy, you could just peck out holes along the ledge and you could have a really cool looking natural, and the answer is, it doesn't work. The engineering doesn't work. That's at least the answer that I was getting from Stephen and Will Gartley, who was sort of an important piece of the base of Stephen's work. Because at high flows, it would all get washed out and the fish couldn't stay in the pools that you could create by pecking away at the fish. That was a huge disappointment, because I thought that was sort of a really cool answer. And so what they came up with was, this is low water mark, right? And this is 29 feet above that low water mark. And so their answer was, we can't get there with this at 29 feet. We can't create the slope that the fish can get up, that according to NOAA's direction, and that was 5% was what we were working towards, that you just can't get there with this at 29 feet. You can when it gets down to 26. And so this point right here is 3 feet above the ledge. And so the idea was you drop that, you would keep it, but you would drop it 3 feet and you maintain the pool except for this little corner where you would have ledge showing. You could direct the flows. Part of the other thing was no maintenance. So part of the instruction was, I don't want to have somebody go down there every day and raise them over and do whatever because it's expensive. So it's designed, they tell me, and I'm not an engineer here, so that the initial flows at very low flow range, the water would come down here and would enter and would go through this fishway, right? At higher flows, the excess would then spill here or here, depending on what you want to do. If you peck away at this ledge, you can have all the water go over here if you want, or you can have no water go over here and have it all come. That's a decision somebody can make, not me. And the height of this was sort of the key to making that work as I understood it. What this shows is basically, it's not a denial the way you saw the other day, but it's sort of this back and forth, which just is a way of taking the length and getting so from here to there is a 5% slope. This is all kind of natural. You'd never notice this. It would be just taking those rocks that are covered in seaweed and moving them around a little bit down in the low tide area. Up in here, the idea was to create a wall that looks exactly like this wall, so that if you're standing at the public landing, you wouldn't know that it was there, right? My concern is that this is pretty wide, but I don't have enough sort of visual to really understand that. But this back and forth is what gets you the 600 feet you need to have 5%. And that's pretty much it. And I said at the time, this is not the answer. I know it's not the answer. I don't know what the answer is, but it's close enough to have a conversation about what you like and what you don't like. And Mike will tell you that there are things in here that he would say probably don't work, right? Or you could work better if you tweak this or you tweak that. But the idea here is to try to generate some conversation about what this would look like and what are other alternatives, you know, that you want to explore, so we spent an hour and 15 minutes going nowhere here, so now's the time for everybody actually to talk about the results rather than talk about the process.
Tony, I think it would be important also to flip forward to the next one and talk about the resiliency elements on the seawall that were integrated as well there.
Yeah, so the way Stephen did this was, this is the fish passage, and his suggestion was to be consistent with the Olmsted design and philosophy. He just raised everything here by 4 feet. 3.9 feet is the 100-year number for the Maine Climate Council, so, and if you're gonna spend this kind of money, you do it for 100 years, you don't do it for 50. And so, what he's done is he's basically raised even the grounding basin, he's just raised it up 4 feet. And then all of this wall, and it gets to be stepped back in here over to all the way to the American Boathouse. There's a problem, technical problem over there because the fish ramp, the walkway for the schooners. If you raise that 4 feet, it would be too steep for them to get their baggage up and down. I mean, it's a stupid thing, but you gotta think about that. And so his idea was you, right there where that enters, you make it 2 feet. And 50 years from now, when it's falling underwater, you just put the rocks in and then you make it 4 feet. I mean, there's some pretty simple solutions to problems like that. But this slope would be a little more gradual than it is today, right? Rather than that sort of really steep slope coming down. Because you're gonna raise this 4 feet, you gotta push that back, and so you have more slope, and less slope, sorry. The paths are actually located in exactly the same position, so you would just pick them up and raise them up 4 feet, and they would all work. The other thing he did was, right in here, you know, this is sort of a really cool place that I go all the time, but you should, you know, one shouldn't, and we don't want people to, and then, you know, but so he's created actually an access and a railing around it to make that a safe place, because right now the town shouldn't have what it has there. It's a disaster waiting to happen. So that's pretty much what I missed, Mike. I mean, that's pretty
Thank you,
much.
Tony. No, that's really helpful. And just because you want us to talk.
Yeah.
Let's
No.
talk. But I do think there are,
I'll stay, but Mike and you guys should probably answer my questions. Okay. Quick question, Tony, and I didn't ask this when I first saw the presentation a year ago, was it? Yeah. But the Fishway in downtown Camden is going to be an attraction if we have it. What would be the viewing places for people to see the fish going up the fish ladder? Because they would be here as they're coming up and you're looking down to where they enter this thing. And then would people be standing on the sluice wall there? Yeah, that's where people go now. I know exactly. So that would be a question, but yeah, you could watch it all along here. Right. You know, walking up this hasn't changed. It looks pretty steep.
so let's think about other pieces of the project, of this type of option that you like or don't like, that we can try and incorporate into some potential renderings.
Because some of that wall may have to be reinforced or whatever, you're gonna have people actually walking. This wall is pretty much of a train wreck and needs to be fixed, whether you do this or anything else.
All right, Tyler and then Ellen.
I think my big concern right off the bat is your water flow of that river. The water flow is tricky because it either comes a lot or comes a little. And I think we saw in the last couple of months when the sluiceway was somewhat broken, which basically you have I don't say a broken sluiceway, but your low point in the system would be letting water into the fish ladder. So my understanding is probably if you had this, even though you provisioned for it to come over the dam, I would say probably like 90 or 95% of the year, you would have no water coming over the dam and it would all be going down through the fish ladder.
No water.
I don't think it's true because of the way that the water backs up through the run in the.
You think there's enough resistance of that compared to
It creates a choke point that's like a dam.
This is like 3 CFS, it's not much that runs through there.
Yeah, so the backup will be significant from the long range.
How much would you, Mike, how much do you think the valve gate has been leaking?
how much has it been leaking? I don't know.
The
It's like
last-
whether that or
the lots of
or the rest of the spillway, the joint, the bedrock, there's a lot of leakiness. But I guess.
Like the last couple months.
I
where
think,
it was
I
bad.
think, I think the point is fair taken though, Tyler. I agree with Seth. I don't think I think it's actually a pretty low capacity fish passage, like really low and, really low. And so I think the conveyance through the fishway would get overwhelmed. And you would most often, like in the spring, have flow over the spillway, area. I do think that there, Tony mentioned, passive operation, no moving parts, but that's probably not realistic,
Well, you probably, if these building owners are gonna be able to call the town and say, I don't want a pool because I need to fix my building. If that's going on, then you gotta have to have a way to empty the pool. If the town wants to provide that service to those owners, then you'd have to replace.
Ellen?
Yeah, I think-
Some drainage.
I have 2 questions. If this is not considered a Danielle fish passage, what is it?
Just a longer run.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
I guess just
Yeah.
in terms of like,
Like,
what percentage of fish could actually get up this grade, because that's sort of how we have determined the quality of the other ones, so.
And
I
what
can't-
type of fish?
Right, I can't really tell from this how accessible that actually is to different fish species.
Yeah, I think the power here, this is a really nicely thought, a lot of thought went into this option. And I think it's emblematic of this type, where you're mostly leaving the harbor park and, the footprint in place, but, adding those resiliency things. I think there are, with all apologies to the team that put together the fish passage design, I think there's some, like, with this type of approach, that's the right location for a fish passage, but, right now it's sloped out as like a continuous 5% chute without any resting or things like that, and so I'm certain that, it wouldn't be very effective for passing fish. But I think with this type of strategy at that footprint, you could instead use a technical fish passage, and probably you could do a serpentine pool and ladder type, in that general footprint. But you just like the continuously slopes shoot down through there, would not be viable.
What was your second question?
Yeah, the second question was that I think, Tony, you said one of your caveats was that there wasn't a maintenance cost to it.
Yeah.
Is that correct? How does that work? I mean, I feel like anything with more engineering would have some inherent maintenance
Well,
cost
the-
to it. Is that not accurate?
There's, all stonework is gonna require maintenance sometime, right? And so to say 0, it's like on your earlier chart, they're sort of down the road, who knows? But on an annual or a daily or weekly or monthly or 4 big storms, nothing to do. You don't have a big storm and somebody's gotta run down here and do something.
Gotcha, okay.
It runs and the water goes where it's gonna go and you don't have to. Anyway.
Operation, has operation.
No operational costs, I mean,
Gotcha,
in the
okay.
end,
So maintenance costs, but not sort of a ongoing operational.
Yeah.
component, okay.
I think you would still have annual costs, like fishways, require annual operation maintenance. You have to clear them out. You have to go out after storms, to clear them out.
What do you mean
And
by clear
then
them out?
what's that?
What do you mean by clear them out?
Well, they'll get clogged with debris
Debris.
and, things like that. Depending on the type, that have removable parts, those will break and whatnot. I do think it's a safe assumption that there would be at least a gate at the head of the fishway, that you could shut the fishway off when you were using it and to be able to do maintenance in it. I think that you probably would be required to have a low-level gate, in the
that's what I'm
deep
thinking, at
part.
some place you'd have to have a gate, if you ever wanna drain that pool, you
Yeah.
have to have a low level gate.
I would say with the lowering of the spillway, it does add, storm event resiliency, and so the frequency, that you have to go and open the sluice, that goes down a lot. I guess the other comment I would also add here, though, a lot of a lot of the important parts of the system there at the head of the fish passage are also directly in the line of, flow coming down the river. So the sedimentation, is a potential there that, you know, would be something that either you have a low level situation where you can open that up to flush sediment out, or periodically needing to address sediment. Yeah, so those are some of the notes I would add.
I mean, those are some of the flaws here. I mean, they're clearly flaws.
But I think as an example of an option, like, you know, if you're not beholden to specifically the way the fish passage looks right there, you know, there is a footprint there that you could, you know, do those things that Tony described, those objectives, you know, and just keep in mind that there's a, you know, a fish passage system in that general footprint, but it's probably more of a technical type fish passage that you can add a lot of aesthetic elements to, you know, masonry overlays and things like that, so that you
Doesn't have to look like that Daniil that
yeah.
these guys
That's
showed
technical,
you
yeah.
a month ago that's long since been removed. There's nobody, because it didn't work. I mean, you know. But so there are Daniils that work better, but, and you can make it look prettier, but.
Yeah, I think, and then I think coming around, yeah, and depending on how much flow you can put through the fish passage. There's a lot of flow going through the fish passage, you could probably leave the mouth where it is shown here, but if it's a smaller capacity, you probably have to bring it back around.
You could bring it up here someplace. Yeah.
Great.
And that, you
Yeah.
know, that's the
Moving-
question, do you wanna get, do you need to get the low tide or not? Some people say, well, the fish aren't gonna try to migrate at low tide, so, you know,
Yeah.
you're way over.
Thank you for that.
All right, moving.
It works for all species, to
Albert?
your earlier question. Elfers, you know, yeah, there's a no-brainer, but.
Yeah, I think, yeah, if you, with a pool.
I mean, a
weir
shad
type
would go up here.
Yeah, shad, yeah.
But the shad isn't gonna go under
It
this.
could work for a river herring and sea run brook trout.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, let's keep going, because we
Yeah.
have lots. Thank you
So,
for
thank
sharing
you.
that.
Thank you
Thanks.
very
That was a
much.
great overview.
Yeah.
So I think we covered a lot of these call outs describing it. One thing we want to point out, just for the sake of, again, reminding you all that there are lots of options under this umbrella. We, I think, all zeroed in on the fish way in that base scheme as being, you know, needing refinement. And just know that your options aren't limited if you want to talk about other scenarios that do move into Harbor Park. You could, I'm not saying that's what you want, but just to know that that's not the only way to go. You could stretch out through Harbor Park to create a longer, larger footprint for a different kind of fish passage. So know that that's part of the discussion today, that you can consider that in balance with how you think about Harbor Park.
That concept would be more like a Damascata Mills, you know, type of scenario, where you probably, you know, it's integrated within the park. Sorry, speaking softly, you know, that type of concept would be where the, you know, sort of again, still a technical fish passage, but something that, is, you can make to kind of blend into the fabric of the park.
Susan, did you have a question?
I was just gonna say, because that area just above the grounding ramp was originally in the design in the twenties, late twenties, early thirties, was for boat storage. So I'm wondering, very few people, except for the kids that go down to the grounding ramp, but if that area were opened up, could you make more of a pool and weir system so that it's not as much of a denial? In other words, if you were to take that area just above the grounding ramp and that.
Yeah, I think you'd make it would, in effect, I think it would be similar to like the Damascata Mills
Okay.
type of situation. I mean, you know, there's a lot of designing elements there, but, you know, you do lots of things to aestheticize it, you know, with masonry overlays and, you know, some alignment things and whatnot, but,
So know that that's on the table here.
I think it's good to keep in mind when you're looking at any of these, and Tony certainly took advantage of it, that elevation lowering of that pool up there at like that, you know, like 1 in 12 is like a 4.5%. So every foot you gain down of that pool elevation is basically 12 feet less of a fish ladder you need to run. So that's why, I mean, that 3 feet lowering of that impoundment really basically got rid of 40 feet of runout on that, so it's.
Yeah.
It's
that's-
valuable, even though it's an expensive process to do potentially, because you're gonna be up there ram hammering or some other thing if you're trying to maintain, pool size. Even a foot drop in that, buys you stuff downstream.
But in these drawings, you have, sorry, you still have the dam, and now you have a fish passage also, so you're really adding costs, is that, I mean, it seems like it would be extra money, is that correct? I mean,
Yeah.
not, I mean, in terms of capital costs, but then also in ongoing maintenance costs.
Yeah, I'll address both of your questions, because they're both really good ones. It is definitely real, like every extra foot, that you can get rid of, you know, the rule of thumb. You know, this length, but $100,000 a foot, minimum, for fish passage construction for, you know, technical fishways and things, so. You know, that is real, and then, to your point also, you know, in effect, these compromise solutions, it is a bigger project, you're kind of doing two projects. You know, so in addition to reconstructing, you know, sort of the dam, you know, with the augmentations, you're also building this, you know, fish passage system and things like that. And then you know, similar or even maybe additional, you know, sort of life cycle requirements for operation and maintenance and repairs as sort of the rebuild option. Because you both have a dam, you've got operating parts, you've got a fish passage and things like that. So yeah, I think those are both really good points. And that'll bear out in those metrics, yeah.
So this is another partial that emerged from the feasibility work and designs after that. It's partial because it preserves some amount of, or potentially rebuilds some amount of the dam here. And then tries to get to a fishway more like what we'll see in full dam removal, which is a cascade coming down over the rocks. That would require some sculpting, some chiseling of the rocks to get the water to flow that way. Additional work on that ledge could be done to send another spur off to the south here. It still includes or starts, this is one of the concepts that starts to really rethink the edge of Harbor Park. So we've got a smaller footprint for Harbor Park here, peeling back and following that lower path with a new wall. And this was the result of sort of iterative design. So this is a wall that steps back, could potentially also go up to a higher grade, but includes steps down, pedestrian steps down to introduce water access or access to the water's edge.
And that one is the wall, you're saying the wall is sort of stepped up?
This wall, yeah, has sort of like a bleacher-like
Gotcha, okay.
quality to it, and that helps with resilience. It helps dissipate wave action as it comes in.
Okay.
But as I sort of said very early in the presentation, there's many ways to do that. It could take a lot of different shapes. I think this is showing one, but how you address that wall would be a subject for more conversation for this group. So it doesn't have to be this, in other words.
No reflecting pond effect.
There's no pool in this.
And that center part actually operates as a fish ladder?
So I'll just comment, just, you know, with this type of design, and you see also with the full dam removal, these are, you know, more of they're not just a one-off, because there's a, you know, there's a little bit of a, you know, we don't know exactly the bedrock structure beneath and things like that. So having done projects like this that really rely on underlying bedrock multiple times, including one that's going on right now on the St. Croix River, the best approach is to, you know, kind of reestablish the opened up area and really see the bedrock, and then within the project cycle, then respond to that with additional adaptations to make sure that you've got the fish passage.
But the distance up is the same, right? It's
Same as what you have today, so the vertical wouldn't, because we wouldn't have the pool anymore. So
Right,
that
no pool,
high,
right.
we'd lose 8 feet, I think, by the numbers that I understand, 8 feet
8
less
feet.
to climb.
So what would the pitch be?
So
Like the percentage pitch?
incline?
Is that
You-
still
you-
4.5?
No, it's probably steeper, yeah. But
One thing for Eamon, when we see these, the drawings like this and everything, and when you get into the shred, is it gonna be possible to show people what it will look like at low tide and at high tide? Because that looks like it's probably at low tide right there. And there's a total difference in the harbor between the two. And I think that's gonna be very important for people to say, well, to visualize, this is what it'll look like at low and perceived high tides in the next 50 years or whatever.
yeah, and it's a good point I'll make, actually, Ray, is, that something you picked up on without us acknowledging it, is that particular graph, we're reusing all these graphics.
Yeah.
That graphic was particularly made to like augment, or look at an option where that did retain some structures of the dam, but then also really emphasizing the access components, and so it is shown at low tide, and there's, tide pools and things like that, when the tide comes up, it's into those stairs and things like that, and up onto the bedrock.
Or just even labeling, this is what it would look like at low tide, not necessarily that we have to have a view of each one.
Gotcha, yeah, but be really clear
Let
what we're
people know,
showing.
this is what it would look like at low
Yeah.
tide.
Yeah, and the same goes with river flow.
Yeah.
As Tony mentioned, it's, these are, graphics are snapshots, right? But, the river is dynamic and has, a whole range of flow, through the year. So that is, as we're going through this, we ask for some grace and like, having people, try to visualize, but, as we get to the, so that's definitely.
So one other question.
Yeah.
What is the partial damming in that?
Can we just say really quickly that this was done as a result of a conversation with there at one point was a committee of the select board and a committee of the library that was supposed to be meeting to talk about this. And that was when the library did their first statement. And so they were saying that they, as a result of the first statement, which said to retain the sluiceway structure and the major granite part up there. They said, well, can you look at ways that you could accomplish this project by keeping the sluiceway and, the granite dam structure? And so it was, I think that actually included the idea of a hypothetical bedrock removal, where it was like, okay, sure, if you want to keep all that, you could, but there would be this major trade-off of changing the bedrock a lot.
So you're
There.
thinking that's basically because they're sort of holding out that part of the bark?
Yeah.
They are,
So
but
that's where the river would-
more
But-
So it's not
Yeah,
technically a dam anymore.
No,
It's just
let me just.
Retaining wall.
Yeah.
Understood, thank you.
Yeah, and to the point, Eamon kind of gingerly, mentioned it, but it would require, because the lowest part of the bedrock is actually beneath the structures that would be retained. It would require a decent amount of bedrock removal adjacent to the sluiceway and whatnot in order to make things work, so there would be. Most definitely changes the bedrock in that area.
And how do you remove bedrock?
A hydraulic hammer, or, remove it mechanically.
I might say that, I mentioned the DEP, one of the things the DEP said to us, that they would actually permit pecking away at that ledge, because the ledge has been manipulated over and over the last 100 years, so they kind of went out and looked at that. If you get a fishway, if the purpose is to get a fishway, we would authorize.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think the other thing I would just point out, is that we put that in, and it's just kind of a tweener concept because it's retaining some of the dam structures and, but it's not fully like taking all the full dam removal out, so.
Yeah.
We made, so it straddles both of those.
And so let's move on to discussing where we go from here, what we draw. So dam impoundment, what I heard from Tony and from the conversation after was the lower we go, the better, the less fish infrastructure needs to stretch out, lower the cost of that infrastructure. I sense from the group that partial removal, though, part of what we're getting at is keeping a pool, so there's only so low that we can go before we're getting into just dam removal. So thoughts on where we should land? Are we going like as low as possible to still have a pool? strong feelings there. I think we can go back and draw something that's maybe in the middle. You did 3, we could do 4, something around there.
I think the waterfall is maybe more important to people, I'm not
Right.
sure, but that comes up in most conversations I have about this.
to
There's
keep
some
the
kind of
waterfall.
significant waterfall happening.
Sure. So for the cascade aesthetic, we don't wanna lose that waterfall, meaning we don't wanna go so low that it's just a little
Yeah,
bump and then the water's flowing.
yeah, but I don't know if the mill pond is important to some people, I don't know what you guys think.
So mill pond's important to, I would say, business owners, right?
When we met with business owners, the mill pond was more important than the waterfall.
Right.
Yeah.
And part of that is because from their perspective.
Yeah,
They
they don't
see the mill pond and the waterfall is on the other side, and for them, the waterfall was actually more of an audience.
Okay.
And I would say they also mentioned that just the aesthetics overall was
Yeah.
the most important thing. I think they,
Right.
you know, what I heard was that it was less about the dam and more about the aesthetics. And so just making sure that we acknowledge.
But
The effect on their.
I'll take another perspective too, okay? If you stand on the other side of the harbor with Lyman Moore's, or if you're on a boat coming into the harbor
Mhm.
and looking at where the waterfall is now, okay? And the water's coming over it, it's a real attraction, okay? And it really looks like, oh, this looks fantastic. Recently, in May, when the water levels were down and everything was going through the sluice gate, it looked like a piece of, it looked,
Right, you don't see any waterfall there.
okay, pardon my word, okay? But it really looked terrible. And I think that we've got to be very cautious to make sure we don't create something that looks terrible in the heart of Canada.
Mhm.
More terrible.
Got it.
More terrible.
Yeah.
Sounds like it
Some
already
people
did.
say, some people will say the dam looks terrible, I understand that,
Right,
okay?
right.
But when the dam is functioning with the waterfall coming over it, it looks
Great,
very, it's an attraction.
yeah,
So let's,
Go with 4 feet.
thank you.
But the question is,
4 feet
just-
lower than ledges, I think, in the.
Right.
Cause I think you were what?
That corner ledge
Right.
Yeah.
to the south is
Here,
at 3 feet.
so we would maybe expose more of that. Another consideration,
I would say, let's go to 4 feet and assume that there's some modification on that corner to get a full footprint.
those who want to keep the dam entirely though, is this an acceptable?
I can't speak for everybody. I mean, you're.
I know, I'm just saying,
well, and we,
I'm okay
yeah,
with it. That's coming from a different perspective, so if you're married to the idea of the historical, you know, keeping it as it was, is 4 feet removal.
But right, that's
In
what
the
we're
realm
also
of-
looking, that's your job on this committee, you're representing a lot of that group, so. I need you to stick your nose out and not say I represent everyone, but I need you to say, I like where that's going, or I don't, and here's why.
well, and the
Well-
good news is we don't have to make that decision
Sure.
tonight, because we
Yeah.
have status quo, and then we have partial removal, so if you just want it the way it is, you get that choice.
Right.
So, that's good, so, I hear all of it, I hear 4, I hear the need to modify the bedrock here. My understanding is that to keep a south cascade, we also need to modify the bedrock here, because once we go down 3 or 4 feet, that dries up, and we need to chisel in there, so.
Cause we're probably gonna want like 6 inches along that, just like a board with some rebar or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question
Got it.
is, do you wanna keep the South Cascade, yes or no, and then they can design.
So committee, on the cascade, I hear we want a waterfall that flows. We want a waterfall coming eastbound. And do we want a waterfall continuing to flow south?
Or could it be a sluice way, or, I mean, if you took a channel out of there, so you still have water flow, but it wasn't cascade, 'cause that's the issue, is you're gonna really quickly, especially if you're going down 3 feet, you're not gonna bring all that ledge down 3 feet.
So water
that
to the
important?
south.
I think water to the south is important, but maybe not the same effect of the whole waterfall coming over.
the
Okay,
aesthetic coming down.
because that's
over
something
is
we
the
can work
most
on
important.
is,
Yeah.
they want water going to the south, we can figure out.
Is
How?
that important to resilience? I mean, if we have, I mean, we're having already a lot more water than we're used to.
Yeah,
Might there be an instance where so much water flowing that we need capacity, we need it
I'm
to
a
flow that
little
way?
out of my depth, but I'm gonna go for it. If you lower that dam 4 feet, you've made such a remarkable reduction in upstream flooding that. Whether
It's
it's
getting more sense.
going off to the right or the left isn't going to be the bottleneck, you're going to keep flowing.
Okay.
Yeah,
4 feet, we did look at 4 feet in the original feasibility study, so there's, you know, a bunch of modeling that looks at that.
so
We'll come to you in a little bit. Thank
we
you.
have dam impoundment, we have cascade aesthetic, I think I have a clear direction, we've got. water flowing to the south, to the east, and we've got a waterfall of some meaningful height. Fish passage, so, we talked about some technical fishway that follows the park wall. And that we understand refinements would need to be made to make that really feasible and functional. That's an option. We also discussed the option to encroach into Harbor Park to create something that would have an even lower slope. In either case, there's material choices that we can make to stitch it in, but I think that's the question is, how's this committee feeling for this option about staying outside of Harbor Park or going through that edge and
If you
rethinking
go
that?
into Harbor Park more, is there less, which one has more chiseling away? Cause that, I don't love that. the
Probably,
Chiseling away concept.
I think neither of them is a chiseling situation.
But there is a difference in the style of fishway.
Yeah, exactly, that if you
I
go
think
through the
that's-
park, you get more run, so you get more length to go out with something a little
And
more
more pools.
gradual, yeah.
Well, and historically, that was not there. I mean, the river went over that section of the park. It was filled
Mhm.
and it was filled so that it could be a boat storage area. And
Right,
that's why the grounding.
right,
was-
yeah, if we take that wall away, that's the direction the river wants to flow.
Right.
Or take the dam and the wall away, that's where it's headed.
But I'm thinking to put a fish ladder in that lower space where the grounding ramp is just above it. I mean, that wasn't there originally in 1929, 1930. It was filled for boat storage. And so if we document that, I think that could be an option.
Sure, but we're not storing boats there anymore.
Well, we're not
That's the
storing,
point.
well, right, you're not storing boats because it gets overtopped.
Right, right.
So what we're discussing right now,
From your standpoint, from the library standpoint, you are interested in maintaining that lower walkway though.
Yes, it'd be
Here,
nice to have
okay.
lower
So I think
access.
that maybe that,
Yes.
it kind of sets some bounds.
yeah, for sure, so what
It
I'm
may not be the
hearing,
same elevation,
right,
and it probably shouldn't based upon what we've seen from.
let's get to that next, so what I'm hearing is something that, if we squint, looks a lot like this. But, and I want confirmation if you can, instead of this ladder-like piece, there's something more gradual that runs through this space, but we keep our path, and that's sort of the line in the sand that we're not crossing into Harbor Park.
Well, is the path important or pathway, what if the pathway had a bridge?
I think the path is important to go down to the water, that lower path.
What if it had to be a bridge because this thing snaked across a couple of ways? Couldn't that be kind of cool?
Higher maintenance, I don't know, liability.
We can come back and say if we need it, for sure.
In other words, to make the walkway less of a dramatic hard edge,
Right,
right? Because
But-
maybe you could like snake it, I don't know.
but if you look at the walkway now, there is space between the walk and the seawall where those front benches are, that is grass.
Yeah.
And it's that area that was the boat storage area.
And I
And I
can,
think it's that area where we can, yeah,
I can answer this simply just to say, when you cross that path, you're also going uphill, and that's
Right,
not the
that's right.
direction we wanna go with the water.
Right.
We're trying to go downhill, so that if we can stay in this area, that's gonna work best for us. If we're in a scenario where we're trying to push uphill, we're
No,
really, I think,
just thought,
yeah.
But I'm just thinking winding in that lower area.
Right.
My mind is where Chris is going, but also reflects what Mike mentioned earlier, and that's the a pool and weir type of Damascus Mills angle, where not necessarily wooden walkways like they have there, but if there were some, I mean, you can sort of adjust the walkway so it actually focuses on walking around where the fish passage goes, sort of combining the two concepts. And
Yeah,
that's just my,
Accessibility.
Yeah, I think that,
next layer.
yeah, I mean, I think that, there's a lot of potential to make designy, integrative decisions where, you've got a park and user experience, there that you can optimize. I think the particular differences between whether you're on the outside of the wall or in the park is, I think when you're outside the wall, you're gonna be, even though you're probably working on the superficial element, maybe you're putting a mason overlay and things like that, but it's gonna be very geometric. in appearance.
If you're out here.
If you're outside the wall, whereas if you're on the inside, I think, you have more, flexibility to make something that, you know, is, lyrical, if you would say, you know, or something like a little bit.
I love
All right,
pulling you
Ken,
into
were
deep
you-
waters
were you gonna try?
of design.
Yeah, I've got, two other bounding questions for
Yeah,
our group.
thank you.
The first one is, we seem to be focused on that side for fish ladder element. Does that make sense, or should we be looking at the other side, or are both sides on the table? First question.
Tony said that it wouldn't, wasn't there some analysis of whether a fish ladder would work over there and the conclusion was that.
It's tricky.
Which side, you mean?
Right
on the
here.
South,
South
on the
side.
landing side.
The problem is getting a 350 feet of run out.
Yeah.
So maybe it's
It's
all.
very steep in there.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's, it's.
so I said, yeah, like I understand, I didn't, mean, yeah, like that's the answer.
Second question is, it'd be good for us to establish what we want for our low water elevation and whether we wanna be supporting that. I think some initial things we're looking at, low water as it is today. Should you be looking at 50-year low water, 100-year low water, and your fish ladder just becomes more efficient as sea level rise happens? It certainly affects things, cause, you know, we talk about lowering the dam 3 feet. Well, if you're also using a high water that's 5 feet higher. It
Yeah,
does
I
affect
think-
the runout.
I think, yeah, so you're, and Tyler, you're querying or exploring like what's the
Yep.
baseline used in for fish passage, yeah. So I think that, well, so first thing, you know, I think you wanna design with both, and I mean, it has to function over the whole range that you anticipate over that 50-year period. In the feasibility study, we based fish passage on mean tide level.
Okay.
And, you know, at present sea levels. And the reason for that is that, and it's similar to the way Tony and the Stephen Moore shows it, is that you have pretty low, pretty flat sloping shoaled areas there that, you know, you can use to make up between, you know, mean tide and low tide, so. I guess I would continue, I've thought about it a fair amount, I think, you know, that's right in there with mean tide, and so I would continue to, I personally. would
Mean tide
basic-
and current tide levels.
Yeah.
Okay.
You need to have it function from now forward. And,
Yep.
you know,
So to come back to this decision or discussion points, we talked dam impoundment, we talked cascade aesthetics. For the fish passage, are we in agreement that my team and I should draw something that moves through the historic boat storage area, but stays, if we can, I'll come back and tell you if we can't, but stays off of that existing path
Yes.
and moves through there?
Yep.
Okay. Then Harbor Park, so as you can sense, we have to, in that scenario, impact Harbor Park. So did the scenario that Tony had, so rebuilding segments of wall. When we do this, should we make that piece of Harbor Park that we're touching higher? Do you want us to draw it that way, where it comes up 3.9 feet and gets at least that area? Here, up higher? Should we bundle in then a longer, resilience approach down the rest of the seawall?
Well, if you don't make it higher, can you go back to the other drawing?
Which one, this one?
No, sorry, there's one with the, oh, no,
This?
no. There was one that had the, like a hypothetical path line closer.
Yeah, I got
Oh,
you.
yeah, that one.
This.
That one there.
Yeah,
I mean, if you don't lift up the path, are you eventually, I mean, you're looking at pretty soon that path is then underwater potentially because of more rain and whatever coming in that direction. I mean, it seems like.
Hmm.
you
I'd
might
have to,
a
I can't
pretty
answer
immediate
that.
Other problem.
I'd have to know how high it is.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know that elevation,
Okay.
so,
Yeah, I mean, it
but
seems like
3.9
it
feet
makes
is the
sense,
state's
but-
projection for 100 years,
There's a
so.
lot of photos showing like about 3.9 feet of water covering that.
And it was underwater then?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so,
So I think the answer is yes, I would
Yes,
look it up,
yeah.
but I would be aware of what your current elevations are, because
Yeah.
as you go up that path right now, it actually starts to, it reaches a point where it starts to gain elevation pretty quick, so I wouldn't take the whole path and move it up 3 feet. I would really
So
take,
lower.
take anything below that and
Yeah.
bring it up.
And maybe that's a chance to make it a little, well, it would be a
Yeah.
chance to make it less
Yeah.
intense.
More accessible.
Yeah.
See if there's some ADA money. we can get.
There you go.
Yeah. We can do those, we can do that math. Okay, so I feel
I
clear on
think,
that.
I think the good thing is that even though Eamon and Jamie are gonna draw out exactly what it's gonna look like, there are some pretty detailed decisions that we're talking about that don't probably need to be exactly sorted out right now.
We will be from a bird's eye perspective after all. Yes.
I would just, I think understanding the impact on the rest of the Harbor Park wall is super important. So it seems to me you kind of gotta go all the way. You gotta draw the whole thing, not just say, well, we'll look this path and then what happens? How does it
Yeah, the
connect
scope
with
of- needs to be.
all of it? I mean, I would
Right,
take
yeah.
your design all the way over the American Roadhouse.
Yeah.
I agree.
That's,
I think that's within
That's what
the
the library just said
scope,
over
right?
and over.
So,
Oh,
right, yeah,
okay.
and that's within the
Yes.
scope, so we're gonna, yes,
Yeah.
good point, sorry,
Let's
I'm
do
just
it.
gonna be mean for like the next 30 minutes, and I'm sorry.
we'll do that.
And I would recommend playing around with it as far as what was drawn there. I don't find very interesting. I found you just made it a straight wall. I mean, actually having the boat ramp there provides some interest to that harbor. So I'd like to see your thoughts as far as playing around with some sort of, curved amphitheater element or bringing that sloping part back in or
Mhm.
modifying how that
Yeah.
area is accessed.
This gets to Harbor Park and public space and how those
Correct,
two
more of the
things
harbor
meet.
park aspect.
Yeah, and so what is the nature of the connectivity for park visitors to the water?
Right.
Is it a chance for lots of seating? Is it a chance to actually walk down and touch the water? Is it all of that? I think I'd love to hear your thoughts. We can draw one and get.
I guess I'm encouraging you to be.
By kids.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think I would encourage you're provisioning for a fairly large seawall for major storm events, but there's lots of times where that's not happening, so I think if you have, a lower seawall that might be where it is now,
Mhm.
and even a step back with an amphitheater type element.
Yeah.
So when people are ready to go on the boats, they can sit there
Yeah.
and talk about things, or kids could go down, or
sure.
there's certainly performances that happen there, so I would encourage you to think about maybe a little out of the box about what that looks like, other
Oh,
than
yeah,
what was drawn there.
yeah. And we can plan for areas that we allow to get that, there's
Yeah.
places that
Right.
can inundate.
Living.
You were sharing something. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say this, the step back area to me makes sense because people can sit on it.
Mhm.
It's an easy way for kids to climb down to get into the water as well, but I agree, keeping the grounding ramp, I think is an interesting variation on it.
And a nod to the history of.
Right, well, not to the history, but I
recognition.
also think it's an interesting variation, I think, rather than having all one thing.
I think my head, because of the current condition, goes right to kind of granite blocky treatment. There's many ways to rebuild the shoreline. It can be riprap, it can be concrete retaining walls, but I'm just not even thinking about that. Is that?
Yeah.
Right, well, when you consider what the wall on the side of the dam looks like now, I mean, Olmsted very specifically said, I want these blocks to be this size and put together in this way, using some of those blocks as if they came out of that wall, perhaps.
Yeah, right.
So on, let me just ask some thoughts here, just like a little bit along these lines, so there is as Tony pointed out, I mean, there is a design complexity as you get closer to the American Boathouse, just based on where that structure is constructed. That, is a sort of a long-term issue that's, will need to get sorted out over time, but, what about, but, bringing a sort of resilient, seawall around Harbor Park over in that way, there's, at some point, has to be a change in grade to kind of tie back into the American Boathouse without raising the American Boathouse and all that. So I don't know, I'm kind of wondering if what about if there's a grounding basin over there?
I was gonna say, can we
That
move the
kind of
grounding
comes up
ramp
the.
to that side, I mean, at
Yeah,
least it's still
that
not.
integrates sort of the changes in grade, that you need to do to tie that together or something like that.
I think acknowledging what pieces you guys wanna keep and then figuring out what's feasible is what we're trying to
Yeah.
accomplish, right?
Right.
So I think if the grounding wrap is something that's important, but it can't stay where it is because of feasibility, then let's figure out where it can go and,
Right.
I think that answers some of those.
Yeah. Do you have enough on this point to move on?
Unless anybody has any objections with the sort of consensus I've tried to call out, then I think we can move on.
Can I just?
Yeah.
I said living shoreline earlier.
Oh,
you
right,
got it,
yeah.
But I wasn't sure if you were gonna talk
Yeah.
about that. anymore.
So that's another strategy. So a living shoreline is a way to recreate a constructed dune condition to help stabilize soils. They're only viable in some situations. It has to do with the orientation towards storm, the type of storms, the amount of space you have to construct it. So we should look more closely. I don't want to answer and say it's possible and then it's
Yeah.
not. But it
We'll look
could
at
be
that.
that we end up with a kind of hybrid where there's a gray rocky part down near the waves that are splashing, but then the upland has more of a planted
More
quality.
natural looking.
Yeah,
Yeah, almost like as you're getting into the lower portion of that slope, maybe that transitions to a more native vegetated, like
Mhm.
living shoreline,
Okay.
dropping down into the amphitheater. That's the ground is.
Some goose poop mitigation has been mentioned a lot by the library. They're sacred, but,
It did.
Goose poop is a big part of things I've heard.
Goose poop
All
and,
right,
like,
full dam
goose poop.
removal,
Yeah.
scenario C.
The full dam removal. So we'll go through a number of illustrations here. This first one is showing the dam has been removed. We've peeled back a lot of this area, the boat grounding area and boat storage area we've talked about. In this, we are conceptually showing that the underlying bedrock has been revealed and the water's flowing over that. And Mike has made the point that we don't know what's down there, so we could reveal it and the flow could be gorgeous and perfect for the fish. It could also be quite steep and not be ideal for the fish. So a way to kind of work in habitat connectivity, if that's a priority, would be to reveal it, but then build a dedicated channel. Go ahead.
I'd even back up before getting to that. I think even with this, and then I would just point out on this particular graphic, it's showing a relatively, more spring-like condition where there's a little bit more water, river. But even with just like the full dam removal, it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. You open it up, you understand what the bedrock is, and you kind of respond to that with adaptations that I think is still short of what the next graphic is. So this is sort of the more adaptive approach, within the project cycle.
Right. So you could reveal it and then sort of pick away at it, or forget to poke away, whatever you said, to sort of create a bit of a channel that makes it a bit better. Or you could have a heavier hand and create a channel that in low flow, you've created fish or sustained fish passage and connectivity from the harbor up. So that's what's shown here. Dam removal, again, we've peeled back to the path, and we've got a channel coming down. This is in low flow, and then in that same design, in high flow, there'd be more of the ledge that would have water spilling over it. Again, it's making sure there's a place for fish to come up during low flow.
What's the area on the left-hand side of that first island?
So this illustration had a pedestrian bridge bring people over to this. I'd put that in the bucket of, let's not worry about it right now, because we can kind of do that in a number of different schemes, so, but that's what that is.
Okay, I'll just point out a couple of elements. The screen is so small that it's kind of hard to pick up, but there is, basically the bottom path there. It converts more to like a cobbly beach type of situation, so a non-paved path. But then there is more of a mid-slope path you can kind of see there through the trees. And then at the upper part, the path comes off Main Street. Next pathway over, right? No, keep going that way. Yeah, there, yeah. So there's a path there that comes off, that's where the stairs are now, but in this scenario, it comes off without any stairs and then cuts over to the upper harbor park there. And then there are some stairs that come down to sort of the beach area.
So that gives you your accessibility.
There was some thought, put into, again, circulation there.
Do you think it's a likely scenario that you remove the dam, you're gonna have too much of a slope with that first drawing, and this would be the better option? In terms of fish passage?
I think that, that fish get up, you know, when you take the dam out, and work with the sort of native ledge beneath it, you know, and the slope ranges you'll end up with, there are river herring and trout that pass, you know, slopes of that range all the time up and down the coast of Maine. It's a very common setup, you know, as you know, there's lots of bedrock overflows at the mouths of main rivers that native fish nevertheless ascend. But with the engineered, you know, strategy, it reduces uncertainty and gives you sort of that certainty on day one.
It would be helpful to understand pitches for each plus maybe the percentage of fish that we think might get up, or I don't know. Is there a way to
That's
to
what-
present that to the public?
Yeah, and we'll have,
When I was
Okay.
describing the metrics in the beginning, we wanna end in a place where we can sort of give a fish passage score to each of these to say, you know,
Yeah.
this one really does it because it's got the most gradual slope. The one unknown, and I keep looking at Mike, cause we just don't know, is what lies beneath the park. So we can't tell you it's a 10% or an 8% slope because it's been buried for over a
Why don't we
century.
know that?
We,
That's
I would-
Westbrook's, right?
I would say that we don't, I wouldn't necessarily agree that we don't know. We have done subsurface exploration in there, and so, you know, we do know where the elevations of the bedrock are and can piece that together. Piece that together with what's observable on the outside of the stone wall. I'm just saying, we don't know exactly you can probe it, like,
Sure, your
You know.
probes only tells you what's under the.
And there are pictures too.
Exactly.
there are pictures.
Yeah.
there are pictures, you know, so, but I would just guarantee.
Data around what fish passage options there are, if within the feasibility report, kind of goes through what
Yeah.
the different percentages and, you know.
And
we have-
type of fish.
Right, and we have some of that
would be
information, so
helpful.
we can build off of that.
Yeah, but I just like having done multiple projects like this, you know, you can say that you know exactly what it's gonna look like. If
Sure.
something's buried, and if you say that, I'll tell you that you're still gonna be wrong.
And Mike, are you usually doing, it seems like most of your trying to achieve certain pitch is done through ledge removal. Do you ever go the other route where you're pinning objects to ledge, or you're bringing in larger elements where you're trying to more of an additive process as opposed to trying to dig down this channel that's a 5% grade, as opposed to, you know, adding things to the other side to extend that out to the 5%?
Yeah, I think, you know, so the process is take things off the
Yeah.
landscape, understand what the landscape is, put some water over it, you know, and watch what the hydraulics are. And I think those are all tools that are
Okay.
at your
So
disposal.
you do additive as well,
You could,
if it makes sense.
take bedrock away in certain areas, you could add elements in certain areas and, or even extend a little bit.
Okay.
This is a good moment, I think, Tyler, to talk about the other
Sure.
choices you have, which are, they're great, and I love the different options you've created. I think to say it very simply, what these are dam removal, so the water flows down over. But what they're doing is creating a pool so that you can get, the hope here is to get the benefit of dam removal for, I'd say, fish passage, resilience, on long-term maintenance, but then to try to create a reflecting pool that has a quality similar to what's there today by building a pond essentially at the top of the ledge. And that would be fed by a pump of salt water from the harbor, so that you get this clean sheet of water with the cascade potentially, but you'd also be removing the dam. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, and I think when we talked about it yesterday, I mean, I think it could also be an eddy within the river. So you could actually, it could feed, your river could come down and one portion of it could go out into this basically a shallow reflection pool, while majority of the river comes down and bypasses it. A lot of it is to try to maintain the elevation of the existing reflecting pool, while lowering the river adjacent to it, because that's one of the biggest issues is the grade of that defines that slope is, and so there's some trickiness in these pictures, and I can even, I may steal. I can steal this.
Just in the interest of time.
Can I steal for 2 seconds?
Come on.
I still, and maybe I still.
Oh, you did it that way, got it.
Maybe I did. So this gives you an idea what you're looking at in these, where you're maintaining a river width. Underneath what's currently the Smiling Cow building. And you need to really look at that river width through there to make sure that you're not constraining it any further than what's happening under Route 1. So the objective would be that you're maintaining at least that width that's coming under Route 1, and you're not constricting it any further. And the two options you're looking at, these were just playing around with, you know, you have opportunities there to, I don't know if this square historic aspect of that dam means things to people. You know, there may be opportunities where you have a waterfall element that's traveling over a bigger area.
Yeah, I think a good way to think about it is almost a piece of public art that evokes the pool that's there today. But lets the sort of process of undamming the river also happen.
Yeah, so trying to disassociate the reflection pool from the river itself as two separate concepts that are both trying to achieve different objectives.
And that one, does it have the across the harbor ugly wall appeal that you're talking about, right in your mind? Okay.
No, we're overflow though, right?
Yeah, so that would be, that would be a waterfall element, and actually.
If it's a waterfall element, what's the deterrent for fish to not attempt that?
Saltwater.
You would actually have it as a saltwater feature. It's a fountain.
Oh, you're pumping it up from the heart.
Yeah.
They did it, and it's been attractive.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually,
I don't know,
so
I don't know. It's like, I'm not gonna put on my, yeah, I think really it's like the amount of water that's going over that and going down the cascade is a lot less and then.
Okay.
I don't know, putting salt water through a pumping system and whatnot is just like,
yeah, I mean,
there's.
probably the least from a maintenance touch standpoint, the least expensive option would be to have it as an eddy of the river that comes in. But I think it's really designed not as it's designed as an aesthetic feature. So you would actually have quite an engineered dam that's designed to have probably not spill over the whole thing. You'd probably have spill every 2 feet, or every foot along it would actually have a designed spillway element to it, like a fountain would.
Wait, so if you're talking about it coming from the river,
Yeah,
in that situation, it's not being picked up. It's not.
Yeah,
not being picked
correct,
up.
in that situation.
But
it
still
would.
having a spillway, so in that situation, how is it deterring fish?
I think, like Mike said, it's just a matter of flow. Majority of the river flow.
I also think that is, you know, both the width of the river that's shown and then that with gravity flow in particular, I think has some substantial feasibility elements that would have to be embedded.
I
'Cause
know, I'm sorry.
the elevation of the existing pool is almost 10 feet higher than.
Right.
All right, so let's
Here we
hear,
are.
yeah,
So dam impoundment on this one is easy, right? The dam goes away in this bucket of ideas. Fish passage, we talked about one approach that unveils the ledge and sort of responds to that. Another makes a proactive step during the undamming to create a channel that we know will operate in low flow. Thoughts? Strong feelings on that, which one we should show?
Can you say a little bit more about how you know? Would you be able to predict that in low flow?
Yeah, it's like the fish ladders or things that we've shown earlier, that we would be building a channel that would have a certain volume to it, and we know predictably the amount of water coming down, so it's also. It goes there first, so before it cascades over the rocks, it goes there, just like in the fish ladder example.
But there'd be no structure in there. It would just be up through that.
It'd be a nature-like.
Nature-like fish ladder.
Step pool, it'd be like a naturalized
I
channel,
think
there'd be a
it's
series
hard
of
to
steps.
determine on that if you don't really know, we don't really have a clear understanding of the necessity of that, so. For me, if you could meet the need of all the issues we're talking about, with it just cascading over naturally, I would prefer a more natural. Answer than one that's more engineered, but I don't know. What the requirement is for that, so that's hard to make a decision.
And it seems like you're guessing as well.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing about, asking us what we'd like to see rendered about this, because it seems, if so much of this is we won't know until we know,
Mhm.
in terms of where that flow is gonna go. I'm not even sure how to answer this.
Well,
It's helpful.
yeah, and maybe some news came out for me during this that maybe we know more about the bedrock, or there's old images that we can reference. I don't know if there's more we can say.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll say, we did just recently collect some additional data right there with the intent of trying to inform this particular alternative more.
So, yeah, where does that leave this?
I think we should just be honest with the public when we present it and just say
Yeah.
we don't know enough, but this is what we do
Our
know.
best guess,
And that, yeah, but that's good enough.
But I think what project elements generally, if possible, make you happy?
Well, this gets the most kinds of fish up in the most natural looking way, but it takes away a good portion of Harbor Park.
Mhm.
But it also creates a more resilient, I mean, we'll probably be able to get a seawall of some sort or some kind of more resilient barrier for the harbor at the park.
Yeah, so this is getting to the Harbor Park. In this case, we would be, like the previous scheme, removing or really reshaping the boat storage part of the park. And it would sort of trigger then the opportunity to improve the resilience of that whole edge, like we discussed last time. So it could be, I'm imagining I would come back with, like we talked about amphitheaters and pedestrian connections, that a lot of that would show up here too, that we sort of get into that edge of the Harbor Park. So let's show what's possible there.
Do you feel there's enough space up there? The drawing I just showed with the pool up there, what is that space used for in this naturalized one, or is it just exposed bedrock? Like, I guess, is there an opportunity there to have maybe not even an active pool, if it was just a,
It's exposed, and generally exposed bedrock, and probably is, it may in, the most peak events become wetted over there. If you didn't modify the bedrock, but
But you could do
it's
probably
generally high and
you could do a
dry.
reflection pool up there though. Like,
Yeah,
it was just like a standalone,
Just a self-contained.
self-contained, yeah.
So, yeah, but the baseline of removing the dam would then, this would dry up and be rocky ledge.
And would eventually become tree?
I think if it's underwater, it has no soil, so it won't grow trees except what you see kind of peek out through the cracks, some leaf litter falls in there. So no, you would have to take the step to vegetate that.
I would say, not right now, but I would say, like, if you look at old pictures of that island,
Yeah,
the island didn't have any trees on it.
yeah.
The island didn't exist, so I mean, I think eventually.
Yeah.
You probably would get vegetation that would creep all the way up in there.
And that's one of those things we can figure out, like, there will be a vegetation management plan, and I think making sure that, the business owners would understand and be engaged in part of what that plan would look like, but I think for today's discussion.
So for the rendering, should we show it as exposed ledge, rocky condition? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think
Okay,
we
we'll
should.
start there. So fish passage will show, take the full dam out and allow the water to come over the ledge. We work with whatever we can for new data to show that as clearly as we can. And are we saying to the public, let's do that as a baseline and then come back in and chisel if we need to sort of tune it up and make it work a little better? Does that feel right?
I think, we're representing, I will just tell you right now, that's a successful, that integrated approach there is a successful fish passage strategy.
Yeah.
More successful than a technical fishway,
Okay.
so I think the way to think about, the way those two things are shown is, like, if you react viscerally, in opposition to seeing a constructed channel through the lower harbor part, that's more of an engineered nature like fishway, then I think we should render, the
It's natural.
So if this is really
more natural dam removal.
hard for you, feels wrong, then we should render something like this, maybe at a
I feel
lower.
like-
flow.
But will it
You
look
are-
like that all the time?
Right, so that was the
See,
comment
that's
about
what I
low
was-
versus
those
high.
photos, I think, don't you? You need to see both ways.
We've heard that.
Low
I mean,
flow.
in particular, this is a challenge with the dam removal because the river is is variable, it's dynamic, and so we do have to figure out a way to represent the flow, just, you know, it's been said already this evening, in sort of lower flow conditions and higher flow conditions and in between flow conditions, so.
But whatever.
Don't buy into much, I mean, these are just example graphics that we're using for a conversation.
I feel like if there's the potential that you would go to this more nature-like passageway that's more constructed, I would do that one because I feel like if you do the first one and then this is like an add-on after, people might feel more like that's like a gotcha moment where it's like, oh, I thought we were just going with removal and now there's like extra engineering that I wasn't aware of versus like if you have that as like, here's as far as it can go versus, you know, you know what I'm saying? Like, that way it doesn't feel like you're kind of pulling.
Bait and switch. Can you say what you said again? Because I think I might be mischaracterizing this as, oh, it might just not work, but I think you were trying to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you go with this, you know, with confidence that it will work, you know, just the exact final composition, there's, you know, it just tell you that.
Is there any way we can add in structures or like, many people talk about a little walkway across or, you know, is there any room for that in these? Do we wanna put that in or is that something we're just not thinking of right now?
I don't think that's gonna sell an idea to someone, and I think if anything, it may, someone may get so distracted by that particular element that I think we may lose sight of the higher.
It's a good conversation for next time too, where we can start to see the pieces and then just to that point, you know, we don't want to make it where.
Too complicated.
Yeah, so if there's a bridge, you might want to do a bridge in all three, you know, just so it's.
And then
it
again,
doesn't-
the bait and switch where if like we show it, like Susan,
Exactly.
we show it once.
You
and
show
then
it,
we
someone
decide-
goes, oh, I really like that bridge and they took it
Yeah,
out.
what happened to the bridge?
Yeah.
So let's
I'm
focus
not-
on the bigger project
don't wanna
elements
go
at
there.
this point. Do we feel like you have?
Cascade Aesthetics, Harbor Park, we talked about. I think we're just touching on public space, so I think we.
Mike, if we're manipulating bedrock. And you're modifying your course, do I have the ability, seems like we keep moving it closer and closer into Harbor Park, do I have the ability to get it back over where I have water flowing currently?
Can you say it again?
I wanna come out and I wanna, instead of going from our viewpoint to the right and drive it into the heart of the park, I wanna come to the left.
Right, go more towards the landing.
And get it over the existing rock elements that are there.
You just haven't talked at all.
Well, you already talked about taking all the rock elements to get so you want.
But there's not as much.
Because you guys haven't talked at all about the impact on the floats or the, I know I'm not a committee member, but if maybe there are write-ups of some of the input that we received in all of those previous rounds. And a significant issue right now is the water directing at the floats. And so that should just be a consideration, like maybe we're trying to solve that problem and maybe we're not. But the sluice bay opening up or even just the channel of the river going for the floats or not is an issue.
Okay, so maybe we can just touch on that for a second. So if you just go back through the sketches, so. I'm sorry, but you know, we're just,
It's good, it's important.
And then one thing we heard also a lot was that people wanted to see potential uses of that space, like the part that you guys are gonna leave all gray. That was something that was said a lot, it was like really, people didn't like seeing that because we said, oh, we're not gonna, like, don't put anything there because we don't wanna upset anybody. But then other people are saying, what we wanna see is sort of somebody's best shot at how that could be landscaped, how you could use that island space, so.
well, I guess for the first shot at rendering, let's just keep it more simple, because the more major thing is like what, you know, taking the dam out and all that kind of stuff, and then I think we would.
Right, that's next.
Or I don't know, or show something, I don't know, but, okay, we flip back a slide, so, or one more, you know, I'll tell you that the lowest ledge, based on the information that we know in the historical photos and the historical the graphic map of 1920, it's all in this area. So that's why this is drawn in this area, and then if it's condition, which is a little bit more of a spring flow to small flood, it's spilling out into this area. And then in the past, we talked about variations that would, you know, I don't know, you can do whatever you want with the whole site is very modified ledge wise over in this area, so there's a lot of options there. But what Allison then was saying, however, is the current flow of the river through the sluice kind of directs out at the dinghy docks and whatnot in here, and so that has been, constraint. Or an issue that's been stated through some of the public, comment. So then if you flip forward, bringing this type of channel out and around, there was an intent to, kind of find, the gap between the dinghy docks and the windjammers. But, this is at a this channel would be sized to take as much of the flow as we could during the spring fish passage season. That is gonna be more dominant flow, but then if you flip forward to the next one, there's always gonna be conditions during storms where you would have water coming down over the bedrock and aiming for, so. I don't know if that's necessarily the purview of, what the committee's looking at, trying to solve that issue as well, but, anyway, just wanted to explain that.
I would think that the sluice, water coming through the sluice would have much more force than water coming through a fishway or a naturalized river. Am I correct or not?
Well, I think, it kind of depends, but I think, the sluice has a fairly small amount of water put through it, it's a 4x4 gate or something like that, whereas if you have an open channel, I don't think you could say that there's more coming through this. It is focused at that location, whereas if it were a natural flow, it would be more dispersed over a wider.
Right, so I would think it would be less impact on the.
But by the time you get down to the bottom of the bedrock, and hit the.
Okay.
Hit the air.
Yeah. Eamon, is there any final request for our input that you need, that we can give before?
So there is, yeah. Thanks for bearing
And we can
with
also
us.
provide like a follow-up email and just say, these are the things that we've
Yeah.
heard, and let's
Right.
confirm that through this.
We'll do
committee.
that. We want to be sensitive to time. So one thing we'll send along are examples of what a rendering is. So what we're talking about is a bird's eye view of this. We'll do it from the same perspective for each of the three versions. And it'll be photorealistic to the extent that we can in Photoshop, make real trees and real materials. We'll do that. So it's what you see is what you get. I think the thing we need to dig into next time, definitely, and something for you all to be discussing and thinking about before then, is coming full circle to where we started. How are we engaging the public? What is the ask of the public? Are we saying, here's the three recommendations, here are the three options, vote on it? Is it, tell us all of your nuanced ideas and we're gonna go back and redraw them? Is it, help us get from status quo, partial and full, down to status quo and one other choice, because we want it to be a binary? So we can build a process that does any one of those. So I think something for you all to be sort of mulling over and thinking about, and for us to discuss in a lot of detail next time, is how to structure that conversation with the public.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. We'll open up for public comment in just a second. I just, sorry. Are you good?
You good.
What? All right,
That was it for us.
there will be a lot of follow-up, obviously, I was gonna actually, but if we can do a. All right, let's open up the public comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, it's been a great discussion. I've learned a lot. But, it seems to me alternative one and alternative three sort of put you in two different extremes. And so I see the most fertile ground in the middle one. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you can come up with in a ground, because I think what Tony did came close, and he put very hard strictures on what his, people could do when they were doing the designing. And if we're already opening it up now to maybe, using a corner of Harbor Park, that gives us even more flexibility to do something, creative. So I'm looking forward to seeing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Going back to the last meeting, you presented a values assessment. So where is that at? Will that be part of the public presentation? Because that's something that I was looking forward to this group. I think it's a core part of what this group should have been doing, or could still do, is do a values assessment for the town. And I'll give you my other question, which is, what about the rest of the river? Taking down one dam does no good at all. So taking down the Montgomery drain triggers a multi-million-dollar project. Will that be part of the cost factor? Anyway, people will ask, what is the effect? Why are we talking about one dam when your goal is to talk about the whole river? You're the MRCAC, the Megunticook River CAC. And I was expecting to see more by this time in your project, more sketches of the whole river, more costs of the whole river.
Yeah, and I think the feasibility study was a really good starting point for that, and due to the vote being in November, we've been told by people to go full bore on Montgomery Dam for the time being, and I think that will then allow us but there is still work being done river shed wide. We
Yes,
just,
I think
as a
we
committee.
To be prepared to answer that question, what will be the total cost, what's the total effect on the town of this one project? It's not just a one-off project.
Right.
This has an incredible impact on the whole.
Under all three scenarios.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
So,
And
for the
for-
values
sorry,
piece, next time we convene, we'll talk about how to engage the public. Using the values exercise would be a great element to do in that public conversation. It's great feedback to have as, you know, if you all decide we want to, for example, get feedback that lets us merge two ideas together, you know, to get it down to a binary choice. Understanding the values that are driving that for folks would help us know kind of what to take from each and how to combine them. It's not bad information to have in any scenario, so I think we can, but we should talk about that next time. And then for cost, just the notion that removing Montgomery means you have to do things to the other dams, I'm not sure is the case, but it depends on how you're looking at it. If you're an advocate for habitat connectivity, it sure does sort of set you up to want to open up more dams, but if you're really thinking about, you know, the dam needs to be repaired, should we think about it differently to reduce our costs? Then you could just fix Montgomery and that could be the end of it. So I don't know that it's necessarily a must that this then triggers many more dam projects.
And that's one thing that we're in constant contact with, like NOAA and Audra, and making sure that we understand all the project, you know, parameters and opportunities, so.
But are you going to communicate that to the public? Because
Absolutely.
I don't think that the public is actually all that aware.
Totally, I think
When
we're
you-
still
When
learning.
you offer them
Yeah.
these three options,
Yeah.
I agree that you
Yeah.
have to show, just like what you said, that if it's just the Montgomery Dam, that's all we're talking about.
Right.
But when you present the other two options that are built around fish passage, you have to show
Absolutely, yeah.
the impacts all the way up the river from the very beginning, from this very first public, all the charrette. Because otherwise, what's the point of having fish passage
Right.
if it's just stopping at the Montgomery?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the point is that there's been a hyper focus on the Montgomery site, but it's a part of a larger, and nobody here is, you know, disputing or denying that it's a first step in an opportunity to, depending on how you look at it, an opportunity to address, you know, the watershed as a whole. And so I think, but in talking, it's a good reminder that all, you know, this hyper focus on Montgomery Dam has to be placed in the context of the rest of the whole watershed initiative. That's, you know, kind of on the MERCAC to kind of set that, because you are charged with, you know, thinking about the whole watershed, in terms of the restoration or how it's managed. I guess, you know, MERCAC doesn't specifically say restoration, it's looking at these options. But, you know, there is a laser focus on this particular site, and, you know, observationally is by far the most divisive, you know, site along the river. It's the closest one to seawater. It's essential to doing anything else, the upper site.
Well, it's also the only one that's up for public
Vote.
vote, so I mean, that's.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, I guess the point I would make though is like, the logic doesn't make sense to just compare the costs of repairing Montgomery Dam and leaving it in place to, you know, a whole watershed wide enhancement project as sort of a direct comparison in costs. I mean, I guess depending on your perspective, you may want to do that, but it doesn't, to me, seem like a lot, you know, a logical direct. You just say, you know, you're comparing the cost of Montgomery Dam itself, and, you know, if the choice is to just, restore the Montgomery Dam, rebuild it, that's the end of the story, you know, and if you, because those upper sites, well, I guess I won't go into too much detail there, but, you know, or if you elect for an option that opens up the rest of the watershed, I think you look at it as an opportunity, to access the rest of those sites on up through the watershed, and, you know, a plethora of external funding that will come to the town to be able to make that happen.
Is it, and forgive me if you covered this at the very beginning, if the other two dams are removed and it's a free-flowing river, would that have any impact on the designs you showed us tonight?
I should really have Mike answer this.
No. No. This, well, yeah, so, those dams are, you know, they're not related to the water that's backed up behind Montgomery Dam. It doesn't back up that far. They are part of the overall, you know, potential Montgomery River restoration strategy. But the key functions and the key objectives you set for this site, you know, the one element in particular, you know, that opens up, thinking about those other sites, is the habitat connectivity, right?
Right, but it wouldn't affect flow eventually when everything's settled down.
No, those dams don't store water now. You know, they impound a pool of water, but they have no flood storage, you know, component.
Right. Okay, I just wanted reassurance on that.
I think if you're going to, as you're saying, indicate that, you know, if you were to remove the dam and then it means you're removing all the other ones or whatever the next step is, equates to more cost. I think that another piece of that would have to be that it also equates to more potential funding available. So it's not just a
dollar,
if this, then this, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So I think that's important.
Yes, but also, I think one question that this committee has to ask is, so say, partial or full removal of the dam is voted for in November. And what you're telling me is that's the only one that's on the table. And so we have other dams that will need to be voted on, I'm assuming.
No,
they're
Private. It's part of it, okay, so the two that come after, so the Knox Mill and those two are included in this.
Privately owned.
No,
they're
privately
privately
owned.
owned.
Privately owned.
Here's, the piece of this is that in order to get funding to
Yes.
restore the whole river, you might know this, and remove the other dams, we need to at least remove part of the Montgomery Dam
Yes.
and allow the fish up.
Yes.
So that's the key. So
Yes.
we're not saying that if we remove Montgomery Dam in part or full, it would definitely remove the upper ones, but we'll get the funding for doing that, and then we'll make the decision.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it's not going to guarantee, the vote in November would not guarantee fish passage all the way up the river.
That's something that needs to be discussed.
We
I don't
need
think
to-
we know what's
I-
going to
yeah,
be on the
we don't know
ballot,
yet.
and that's something we
Okay.
have been talking about for a year and a half, is
Mhm.
what does river restoration look like? How do we look at it project, you know?
And that seems like that's something.
It's a really hard question though, and it's really hard
It is a
for
really hard
this,
question.
yeah, and
It
that's
is
why
it
it's
is
taken a
really-
long time, yeah.
Yeah, but we're gonna be voting on something in
Right,
November.
and we'll make sure, yeah, and I think we don't
But
know
you're
what that
telling me
is.
that I don't need to know what the full plan.
No,
for the
you
river
do
is
need to
in
know.
order to vote in November.
No, I think you do need to know, and we are still developing what that's gonna look like and what's going to be on the ballot and what, like, there's still, we're still answering questions and we're still
It's been a 6-year process.
totally,
And we're in like the 11th hour.
right. I know.
And we
But
still don't know what
Jessica,
that looks
there is also a lot of information that's available. It's like,
like. I understand that.
it's not like, so, I mean, it's a communication, setting up the public to have,
It is.
to cast an educated vote. And these folks have been working for the last year on coming up with a strategy to, you know, and had various outreach, various, you know, education events, outreach at, I don't even know the start of all the activities that they've been doing. But, you know, like what you're raising is, you know, just reiterates the importance of setting the context of this specific vote within the context of the larger initiative. But I think, you know, you have to, and that information is there, and there's, you know, there, I think has been a fair amount of outreach
I have
about,
been at home watching these Zoom meetings. So it's not that I haven't been, I just haven't shown up, and I'm frustrated enough now to starting to show up.
Well, thanks for being here. I do wanna
Yes.
be thoughtful, the 2 minute, we
Okay.
created these rules for 2 minutes per person. I'm not trying to be a mean
Can I
person.
say one last thing?
Sure.
Are we aware that we are guilty of doing the same thing right now, sitting in this room, imposing our built structures? Because what I'm hearing is we're making natural-like structure, even with full removal of the dam, we're talking about chipping into the bedrock perhaps to create easier fish passage. So we are going to be guilty, and it would be the whole town, I include myself in this. We are going to be guilty of doing exactly the same thing that we're critiquing, which is in 100 years, are people gonna look back and say the same thing about what's being done? Because we are going to be imposing something.
I don't think
on
that's
the natural
necessarily true. That's one of the options, but that's not
It's not true.
guaranteed.
It's not.
But you're saying it as if it's the only, like, it's a guarantee that if you remove a dam, there is going to be a human impact added in.
That's
Which is
what I
not
just-
necessarily the case from the.
That's what I
conversation,
just heard.
which is-
But I do think it's a really sage point to say is like the decisions that people are making in the town of Camden, the MERCAC, should be thinking multiple generations in the future.
Yeah.
Thinking about your grandchildren, your grandchildren's grandchildren, that is the perspective to have, and
Alright,
so that's a really good point.
yeah.
But following on what she said, I think you have to pay attention to where the bedrock is now. And those illustrations show the river running down over where the falls are now. Whereas the natural bedrock tips down towards Lower Harbor Park, which seems to me was the original channel. So to get anything similar to those drawings, you would have to take a lot of bedrock out of the south side and move it over to the north side, and Lower Harbor Park isn't gonna look anything like what it does now.
That's correct.
I say all that,
That's
just to say that if you're gonna do any of those, my preference would be for the one that has an island. So that you could have like something like Damascotta going down through Lower Harbor Park. But also having somehow getting water, the overflow water running over the other side, so you would still have a falls. Bottom line is what I'm saying is you gotta pay attention to the bedrock, or you're gonna wind up with an artificial looking thing.
Yeah, and I described earlier the options that show the bedrock or the dam removal. I'm quite confident that, you know, the edge of the water that is going through the current footprint of Harbor Park that's shown in those drawings is in that lowest portion. I don't know if you captured though there.
The one with the island, you're saying.
That scenario that goes out through the grounding basin, follows the lowest bedrock, and then comes around.
Right, so when you're saying 3 options, I'm afraid you're gonna leave that one out. Because you're talking about one option being leave it as it is. So then it's either remove the entire dam and you move the entire river to the south based on what this drawing says, or.
I'll just clarify, because it was really clear from the group. The directive we have is 3 options. One is you build the dam as it is, so that's the status quo. The second is partial removal, so lowering the dam, and the directive we were given was to send a pool and weir or nature-like fishway through Lower Harbor Park, so that would look really built. And then the third, what I heard was remove the dam, remove part of Lower Harbor Park so that the water can flow over the bedrock that's underneath and out to the harbor. Those are the 3 drawings we're doing coming out of this.
All right, and they're all, and on just a totally different point, really. There was discussion of a couple of options that would involve removing bedrock from what is now the mill pond, from the south end of the mill pond.
Yeah.
So that you could lower the profile by.
That would be in that middle option. We talked about doing a little bit of that to continue to have water flow into the south like it does today, but there would be an intervention.
All right, so I have always assumed that would be a big problem, because the rock that you're talking about removing there is on Tom Rothwell's property, Camden Deli's property. So, and I don't know, Tyler said he had a meeting with Tom, among others, I've always assumed that Tom Rothwell would sue you.
Yeah, and I think
He could.
since he's not here, I think we just shouldn't assume what he would say, because I also think that like the property line is maybe a little off of what you're thinking, and it's something that I'm trying to always clarify as well, so I hear you, and I
Okay,
thank
but
you for
if
your
look
comment,
at
but I
the
just wanna,
GIS tax maps.
Right.
It certainly looks like that rock is on Tom Rothwell's property.
okay,
All I'm saying is, you got.
totally, and there's a lot, there's so
Yeah.
many pieces
Yeah.
here, so.
There.
Noted, yeah, definitely why we're talking to him. Oh, sorry, real quick, we're gonna go to Allison and then Chris.
I just want to say really quickly, Ken, Ohio might be a fun thing for everybody to Google. They struggled with a very similar debate for a very long time and came up with a compromise that they called dam restoration. It was a little similar to Tyler's design. They won awards for it afterwards. Again, it's not my perfect preferred solution, but I think it did make a lot of people happy there. So it'd be a fun thing for just people to look at, maybe.
Chris?
I'm gonna go real quick. First of all, I'm so impressed by the committee, and it's very exciting to see the designs taking shape. I'm gonna ask a couple questions. You can ignore them or answer them later, take them as you will. One, is it for sure that a technical fish ladder cannot come up the public landing side? I seemed like that was probably true, but I just want confirmation on that. Two, in the leave as is scenario, could there be an as is, a true as is, and kind of a quote unquote enhanced version? So that you do get a sense of modernization, but it's still kind of an as is scenario. Habitat connectivity, does that include any discussion of existing habitat impact? Or is that a completely separate concept just relating to fish ladders? And then last thing is, this is completely anecdotal. I think you guys have done a really good job of trying to involve the public, inform the public, with newsletters, FAQs. You've put a lot of information out there. But anecdotally, I still get the impression from the people I talk to that the public is not included. And so people who are gonna do a deep dive are gonna get all the information they want. But the man on the street, I still feel like it feels like a little bit of an impenetrable process with too much information. So my suggestion is that when you do present these drawings, that is more than just a vote on 3 options. That it is a comment harvesting, or else you're gonna have a lot of buyer's remorse and a lot of annoyed people, because this is gonna be the biggest transformation of downtown Camden for decades, and it is a generational decision. So I think you've gotta collect those comments in a way that's really transparent, and everybody sees their neighbor's comments, so they feel like it's a conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, good point.
Well, that was fun. I think our time is about 50 minutes over, so I think without Sophie, I almost did it. Thank you all for being here, public. I know.
Do I need a motion to adjourn?
Yeah,
I
sure.
second.
Okay, second.
Nice job.
Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Airplane home.
I'm glad.
Sorry, Sam.
Yeah.
This one?
Thanks for being there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Helping.
I did.
Yeah, cool. That's what we're part of that, like, scoring idea, will help with that. We do it all together. Picture. Yeah. Yeah, you know, and it's. One man's. Yes.